And I think that we have to understand these occult roots, which are much deeper than a superficial analysis must show. So when you're talking about people then and now, we're talking about the degeneration of people. And that's what this human alchemy was all about. It wasn't about ennobling and edifying us. It was devolving us so that we would become more toward the ape rather than ascending toward the angels. And so part of this was a timetable. And the timetable was to watch when they believed that humanity had degenerated sufficiently that they could show to us the crimes that they have committed.
Oh my
God. That is the revelation of the method.
Tinfoil hat.
Oh, what the f*** are you guys even talking about?
Global controls will have to be imposed, and a world governing body will be created to enforce them.
Welcome to Tinfoil Hat. We go deep, homeboy. Eric, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
Are you ready to get your mind blown?
Revolution will be podcasted.
All right, guys, welcome to Tinfoil Hat live from the Wise Wolf Gold and Silver Studios adjacent. Just go to samtripoli.gold, use the promo code TINFOIL, and you too can get in on the Precious Metals game for as little as $50 a month. We are very excited to have our returning champion. He's one of the OGs of what we do, and we're honored to have him. Author, wonderful researcher, honored to have him back. Please welcome Mr. Michael Hoffman. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Sam. I'm very well.
We are honored to have you. For those who may not be familiar with your last appearance, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where our listeners can find you?
Well, my main place for my work right now is michaelhoffman.substack.com. I also have a website, revisionisthistory.org, where my books and newsletters can be purchased. I'm a former reporter for the New York Bureau of the Associated Press, and I worked for a time as a copy editor and a consultant to the New York Times. That didn't last very long, as you can imagine.
I'm sure the stuff you talk about, especially when you were doing it, probably ruffled a couple feathers. But today it would seem like it's pretty, like, you know, that like all your hard work and all the guys like you who started this a long time ago. It's got to be interesting to see everything you've been talking about being talked about openly in the mainstream media a lot.
Right. And that's a two-edged sword. It's what I call the revelation of the method. And then tied into that is truth or consequences. There's a city or town called Truth or Consequences on the 33rd degree of north parallel latitude.
And oh my God.
Consider me obsessed with the notion of mystical toponymy, which I learned from my mentor, James Shelby Downard. In my book, Twilight Language, I discuss some of the things that happened along the 42nd degree of north parallel latitude in the 19th century. Many powerful religious movements, including Mormonism, which shook the country, happened there. It was kind of like the Berkeley, California of that time. And I've also paid attention to the 33rd degree and other aspects of this notion that time relations among events are soon to be first constituted by the specific physical relations obtaining between them, which is actually a dictum of nuclear physics, and it can be applied here in the sense of the once and future king that T.H. White talked about, and which James Shelby Downard and myself related to in our little essay called King Kill 33.
I bought the book. Well, I'm excited to have you on. This is going to be our 4th of July episode. This will go out on Friday. Where would you like to begin? Because you have some very interesting topics you want to talk about, and I'm excited to hear them.
Well, for the sake of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, America's birth certificate, maybe we should start there. Gordon S. Wood is a very astute historian of America who recently passed away. I certainly don't agree with everything that he wrote, but one of the things that he wrote is that the colonists were not just rebelling against taxation without representation and other injustices imposed on them from across the Atlantic. They were also revolting against the age-old view in which common people were forever divided from those of noble birth. And that was truly revolutionary, and it began here in the USA, thanks to the founders. Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson, who was both as governor of Virginia and then as president of the United States, created a Freethinkers Manifesto, which is so advanced we haven't even caught up to it in the 21st century. And in his first inaugural address in 1801, he declared, "Error of opinion may be tolerated where reason is left free to combat it." So in other words, error has rights. He also refused to countenance a religious test for elected office. So with those two beliefs, he destroyed the basis of any inquisition in America, such as the old world epitomized. And let us not forget, there was also a Protestant Inquisition against Catholics, though we mostly only hear about the one put forth by Rome. And even today, the Jefferson concept of no test for office has become controversial because Pete Hegseth's spiritual advisor, the Reverend Douglas Wilson of Moscow, Idaho, Christ Church down there, as he calls it, has stated openly on various podcasts where he's interviewed that if his version of Christianity takes power, Catholic pilgrimages in honor of the Blessed Virgin Mary and the Catholic Mass, if it was openly celebrated, will be suppressed. He also claimed that the idea that you could have, for example, Muslims run for elected office would be against the founders' notions. Well, in order to put forth that idea, he would have to nullify Jefferson. And Jefferson and Madison, in my view, George Mason and others are really the constituent factors behind our American Revolution. You can't get rid of them without nullifying the entire project. And yet this is what he's trying to do. So we have to realize that many of these things remain controversial. The struggle is still ongoing. And then I've been looking for years at the Whiskey Rebellion because it's so anomalous in that it represents something that's contrary to right-wing histories. Okay, right-wing histories of the early American Republic skate over facts about the Whiskey Rebellion, about what George Washington and the tyrant Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, really imposed on America and on those beleaguered farmers in Western Pennsylvania, many of whom were veterans of George Washington's Continental Army. And yet, because the country was mired in debt, and they wouldn't really come out of that until Albert Gallatin became Secretary of the Treasury, succeeding Hamilton under Thomas Jefferson. And he was really a person who helped to devise a limited system of government where taxation was very low and we were getting out of debt. But that's a story for another time, although Gallatin actually assisted the farmers in the Whiskey Rebellion in Western Pennsylvania. And so in these right-wing histories, there's hardly a ragged, bankrupt farmer in sight. You know, the conservative history texts often raise these issues they raise issues about everything except what I'm raising here. They studiously ignore the usury banking, which, for example, that led the farmers of Western Massachusetts to Shays' Rebellion in the 1780s and really put a scare into the founders as they were devising the Constitution, which followed just shortly after that rebellion. So the right wing takes comparatively little note of the contempt of the American ruling class in the 1790s for the impecunious whites who had done the back-breaking tasks of pioneer settlement, which is often ascribed to Black slaves. And many of the people who did that work among the whites were actually slaves themselves. As I pointed out in my book, they were white and they were slaves. But the back-breaking task of pioneer settlement involves land clearing and swamp draining with hand tools. There's nothing more difficult than that. And so they wanted their piece of the pie. And Washington at the same time was warning against factionalism. And he's famous among conservatives for doing that. What a noble thing that he did. But he branded the Pennsylvania Farmers Associations and militias as factionalism. But he himself was a member of an elite faction, the Cincinnatus Society, which was limited only to officers who had served in the American Revolution and was something of a association to protect the privileges of the elite in America. Now, I want to point out, I'm not suggesting here that there is something sick or pathological about the founding of America. You heard me earlier eulogizing Jefferson and Madison, George Mason, and others like that. And of course, George Washington's service during the American Revolution was exemplary. He was freezing at Valley Forge. the virtue and his character, his tremendous virtues that he had there, led that army into victory against what was alleged to be at the time the greatest military power in the world. I take nothing away from him, but over time, all of us suffer in terms of our rectitude. It's just sort of like the second law of thermodynamics: order tends to decay, and it happened in the case of George Washington, so that by 1794, under the baleful influence of Secretary of the Treasury Hamilton, I think he really came to his lowest point, as James Madison actually said after the fact. And my good old buddy Thomas Jefferson was implacably opposed to what Washington was doing against the Western farmers. And so I'm very proud of that aspect of his. And as I said, he chose Albert Gallatin, took him out of the dissidents who were opposing Washington and protecting and defending the farmers, to be his next Secretary of the Treasury. So this is all a revisionist history, which, yes, it has been brought out in bits and pieces, but isn't emphasized to the extent that it should be, that we can understand that, my own Christian view is that man and women are inherently fallible. And so we can't create heroes who are without sin, without transgressions. And we're actually doing them a favor by pointing out where they have failed and where they have done good. I think where the left and the right both are neglectful here is the right deifies these men and the left demonizes them, and the truth is somewhere in between. And that's what I've tried to bring out in the Whiskey Rebellion, which really is a horrible confirmation of how the poor whites of America were still being stigmatized. Gordon S. Wood held up the statement that the goal of the revolution was to unite rich and poor and abolish those different caste sort of distinctions. And yet they were cropping up, and therefore eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And that's what was necessary, because when Washington sent an army against those farmers, the ones that he could capture, he paraded through Philadelphia. Philadelphia was the capital of the United States in 1794. He paraded them at Christmas time through the streets, barefoot, half naked, and was really scurrilous in his attitude toward them. And it's not the best light that we can see Washington in. So why do I bring it up? Am I trying to smear the American Revolution? No, I'm a revisionist historian. I have to follow the facts wherever they lead. They led me to a neglected part of history. And in my next part of my study on michaelhoffman.substack.com, I'm going to be discussing the Black revolt against the founders because of the hypocrisy of calling for equality for whites and then keeping men in chains. Although there are many anomalous factors to that which have been overlooked, which I hope to bring out, including the fact that the first sincere, widespread abolitionist movement against slavery in the world was created in the United States. And so at the same time that they were holding slaves, they had a bad conscience about it. Washington did, Jefferson did. But nonetheless, I wanted to explore what led these Black people into the British Army to fight for the British against the Americans. It's something that is really underscores a tremendous tension between the factors that the left has brought out. And in some cases, they're absolutely right to bring them out, but my conclusions are different from theirs.
Let me ask you something. I have been under the impression that most revolutions aren't started by the poor. They're mostly started by the lower upper class, meaning like rich kids who feel like they hit a ceiling and they can't ascend to the highest levels that they want to. But based on what I'm kind of hearing right now, you're saying that's not necessarily true.
Well, in a case, if you want to call the Whiskey Rebellion a revolution, I would call it more something. I mean, we're quibbling about words, but I'd call it more like an insurrection. But the American Revolution itself, the interesting thing about it, and I think why in part it succeeded, was because it did have a section of what we could call the upper class involved in it: lawyers, physicians, scientists, statesmen, men of property were sincerely involved in trying to both lift the boats of the poor as well as cast off the chains of King George III. And I think that's what made it successful. And for a long time, the movement, or the populist movement in the United States, did not have that factor. It was really a lower class movement in many respects. Pat Buchanan was a middle class person who was trying to lead the middle class, in many cases the poor, the proletariat. And at the same time, he was really resisted by the upper class and the ruling class in the United States. And I'm not entirely endorsing Pat. I thought he was very weak on his promotion of Ronald Reagan, although loyal to him, which is a feature of Buchanan's personality. But yes, I grant you that quite often it does emerge from the top, but the way it emerged in the American Revolution was beneficial to all because it was a sincere and intrepid move on the part of people like Jefferson, who was a property owner. Washington was a property owner. They knew they would be hanged on Tyburn gallows in London if they failed. And this was really an example of a union between if not the races, of course, but between the classes. And I think this is something that the cryptocracy today is trying to do. They're trying to divide white from black, and in particular, they're trying to divide the working class. I'm not a communist. I'm not even a socialist, but I am a free enterprise Christian. Apart from usury, I believe there's capitalism, and that's just a euphemism for moneyism. And then there's biblical free enterprise, and that's what I stand for. And in that particular case, I think that what we have is we have a movement which should have moved in that direction, in many cases did not. But Jefferson and the others stood for that, and they stood for that unity against what we're seeing as a movement today against the unification of the working class. When you have a united working class, I think that's the strongest power in a society because they're still the ones that keep everything running, no matter how much we like to think the intellectuals and the lawyers and the doctors and the scientists are doing it. It's like my affinity for Dr. Diesel, who invented the diesel engine. He isn't even given the credit. When you refer to Ford, it's always with a capital F, Henry Ford and his invention. When you refer to diesel, it's with a lowercase d. And he doesn't even get that respect, but nothing, very little in America or the world would be running if diesel engines stopped today. Everything, almost virtually everything is moved by diesel power and energy. And it's the same thing with the working class, who I don't think electricians and plumbers and mechanics are going to be replaced by robots anytime soon. And so I've always stood with them. I was raised in a middle-class family, but my father was raised very poorly. And my grandfather, who was an immigrant from Europe, but came here with a tremendous love for the poor and working class, I imbibed that from them. And I still stand there with the working class. And so, yes, I think you're correct about a leadership that often comes from the top down. But in the American Revolution, with the exception of the Shays Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion, was largely a proletariat and upper class unity there. And so my point here in pointing out the mistakes that Washington made is to try and show that there was a flaw in the revolution, but it didn't cancel it. And I think that what the left is trying to do, especially with the 1619 project that the New York Times put out, and I think has been largely discredited, they're trying to pathologize the American Revolution. And this is part, I think, of the widespread racism against white people, and the fact that we don't have the same rights as others do. And when you get into that, then you're really working up a race war. And I think that many black people, the majority of goodwill, and many white people don't want to see that. They want to be united. They understand that there's a ruling class and behind it a cryptocracy, which is utterly opposed to their welfare. And the way to work against that is through unity, but not based on fictions, based on truth.
And I don't want to get too far away from what you want to talk about, but do you feel that there's enough conditions today that in any other time in history there would be revolution going on?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you raised that point because I think I'm interested in the alchemical progress of the conspiracy. And in my book, The Occult Renaissance Church of Rome, I started it in the 15th century with a fellow named Plethon who showed up at the Catholic Council that had convened in the middle of that century, and then went on to help the Medici found the Platonic Academy in Florence. And out of that came this extensive conspiracy, which led from Neoplatonism to Hermeticism to Kabbalism and to Rosicrucianism, all of them with a Roman root. This was a subversion of the pontifical church. The church caved in many respects, as I document in 723 pages of my book. And then it led to Rosicrucianism, which is the beginning of the roots of Freemasonry. So most people associate Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry with Protestantism, or at least a kind of heretical Protestantism. And that isn't true. Its roots begin in Rome and in Florence. And so from there, you get into where alchemy, and not the pursuit, of course, of gold from lead, but the actual human alchemy gets going under Rosicrucianism in the 1600s. Damn. And there you see many of the aspects of control, many of the memes, many of the neurolinguistic manipulation of people that is at work now, back then. And so I'm tracing that from there to the present. And I think that we have to understand these occult roots, which are much deeper than a superficial analysis must show. So when you're talking about people then and now, we're talking about the degeneration of people. And that's what this human alchemy was all about. It wasn't about ennobling and edifying us. It was devolving us so that we would become more toward the ape rather than ascending toward the angels. And so part of this was a timetable, and the timetable was to watch when they believed that humanity had degenerated sufficiently that they could show to us the crimes that they have committed.
Oh my
God. That is the revelation of the method. And we've seen it constantly from the Kennedy assassination on up, where they, in the 60s, they were dropping hints. In the 70s, it got heavier. In the 80s and 90s and in the present, it's blatant. Now, they're still keeping secrets, of course. They have to protect the various agents who are working for them, committing murders and so forth. But at the same time, they had this concept of the degeneration of humanity. Then you reveal to them what you've done to them. And this is what I call the Blackjack 21 gamble, because these people in the cryptocracy are risk takers. They are virtuoso risk takers. And I almost grudgingly admire them for that, for the chances that they have taken, the chances they've taken in being exposed and being hanged or mobbed or tarred and feathered. And yet over and over again, they have succeeded, because it seems to me that in many cases, they did accurately gauge humanity and its degeneration, so that in our current state, what should be a cause of complaint and protest and uprising becomes grist for an adrenaline mill, where conspiracy theory degenerates into what is the next thrill that I can get from contemplating these mysteries. And when you do that, you're also in awe of the satanic majesties who have oppressed you. And so we become spectators at our own demise. Now, the next part of the revelation of the method is truth or consequences, which is they put the truth out there, and they take the chance that we are going to serve them the consequences, which 150 years ago would then be hanged from various light poles around Washington, D.C., New York, and even Los Angeles. And now it's a case of most of us looking at this, shocked at what we see. And the shock, instead of propelling us into action as fully human beings would do, paralyzes us. I call them agents of paralysis. And this is what's happening. That's why in my book, Twilight Language, I said that about 95% of conspiracy theory is worse than useless, because it's paralyzing. You can have some of the most fantastic and obvious conspiracies put in front of you. The alleged mass murder of the country and Western fans in Las Vegas by Paddock. Okay, that was Paddock had no background at all. The closest contacts that he had, there was absolutely nothing in his biography showing that he would be prone to any of this. And they have yet to turn up any motive. What they did themselves was a mass terror act against the people in Las Vegas, okay, against those country and Western people.
Yes.
And my point here is that there was a tremendous ferment for about a month or two in relation to that electrifying massacre and event, in the sense that it had been a conspiracy. And there were videos analyzing the angles of the shootings and whether or not a helicopter was involved. And it was really a hothouse of interest. And Tucker Carlson, to his credit, went to Las Vegas and did a interview with people there on the scene. And then it subsided. The paralysis set in, the apathy set in, And the conspiracy theorists move on to look for the next shock to their adrenaline system.
Yes.
And this is deadening. It's poisoning to the soul. And this is the stage, the alchemical stage that we're in at this present time.
Hey guys, real quick. Have you ever found yourself awake at 2 a.m., phone in hand, Googling things like, is this normal for dogs? Or do I need to call the vet right now? You're not alone. All right. Those unexpected moments are a part of having a pet, which is exactly why ASPCA Pet Health Insurance exists. It helps take some of the financial stress out of vet care so you can focus on your pet and less on cost.
The ASPCA Pet Health Insurance Program offers customizable accident and illness plans that can fit your budget, your lifestyle, and even your pet's particular quirks. Because let's be honest, vet bills can add up fast. ASPCA Pet Health Insurance has been around for almost 30 years and has covered over 1 million pets. And when it's time to submit a claim, it's easy. Just use their app and receive reimbursement for eligible vet bills directly into your bank account so you can get back to focusing on what really matters, your pet.
To explore coverage, visit aspcapetinsurance.com/tinfoil. That's aspcapetinsurance.com/tinfoil. Again, that's aspcapetinsurance.com/tinfoil. This is a paid advertisement. Insurance is underwritten by either Independence American Insurance Company or United States Fire Insurance Company and produced by PTZ Insurance Agency Limited. The ASPCA is not an insurer and is not engaged in the business of insurance. And we thank them for sponsoring the show. Hey guys, real quick, I want to tell you about our good friends at Wolfpack Gold. That's right, Wise Wolf Gold and Silver. Guys, the more money they print, the less your money's worth. And that's why you got to stabilize it. You got to get into precious metals. So let me tell you about Wolfpack Gold. If you're paying attention, you know that de-dollarization is real. Fiat is fake, and you don't want to be left holding the bag when the dollar collapses. Gold and silver has been money through all of recorded history and are an excellent way to protect yourself from inflation and geopolitical turmoil. That's why I trust my friends at Wise Wolf Gold and Silver for all things precious metal. Veteran-owned and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau. No transaction is too big or too small, and you can even roll over your 401k or IRA into physical gold and silver. And if you think you can't afford precious metals, think again. With the Wolfpack monthly membership program, you can get gold and silver delivered directly to your door for as little as $50 a month. Wise Wolf Gold and Silver also deals in and accepts Bitcoin. So go to samtripoli.gold, promo code tinfoil at checkout to receive free constitutional silver. And remember, in the world of bulls and bears, be the wolf. Now, do you find that the Epstein case might be a little different? Because it seems to be people are demanding some kind of action for a very long time, almost to the point where they just keep thinking they could ride it out. Or do you think that's a big psyop, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's wonderful that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey and others are saying, when are we going to see any of these perpetrators prosecuted? That's exactly the question to be asked. We want prosecution. One of the ways that the cryptocracy recruits for these crimes is to say, look at our record. We have been immune to prosecution for the last 70 years. I mean, one of the reasons I admire Jim Garrison, and people cite his different faults. Well, he wasn't perfect, but he went for the jugular. He tried to prosecute Clay Shaw, who was a CIA asset and one of the Kennedy conspirators. He didn't just write about it or talk about it. He went as New Orleans district attorney for that prosecution. That's what we need today. And it isn't happening in the great betrayal which the Donald Trump administration has inflicted. And so this is where we're stalled. But at the same time, I credit everyone who's demanding a prosecution. That's very positive. I'm not saying everybody in America has degenerated. There's a significant minority, at least, that would like to lead us out of this morass. And that's part of it. But at the same time, Sam, look at the stonewalling. Despite that fact, they're getting nowhere, you know. And Joe Kent, former director of the Counterintelligence Bureau of the United States government. Imagine the access he had to so many secret files. Last month went on gave a video and talked about how Kash Patel's FBI has obstructed the Counterintelligence Bureau's investigations into the Charlie Kirk assassination, into the attempted assassination of Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, obstructed by the FBI. And I still don't understand how that hasn't gotten sufficient play in the populist media that purports to be for the people. And that should have been electrifying, that fact. That's revelation of the method to its core. That this guy who was appointed, he wrote a book about gangsters and the FBI and everything else, has completely done a 180 on this and is obstructing these investigations. And Kent strongly insinuated that he had a pretty strong line on who was behind the Charlie Kirk assassination. As you can imagine, it looks like he was suggesting that it was the Israelis. Now, that's anecdotal. I understand that. So what we need is a forensic investigation. We didn't get it in Butler, Pennsylvania, with the perpetrator's body. We're not getting it in the Charlie Kirk killing. And so we have to, and all these millions of dollars who are, and big high rollers who are behind the right wing or the populist movement must focus in on this, that we need to, if we can't get the government itself, then we need to hire lawyers and investigative journalists to issue reports, which are then submitted to grand juries or however you can do it. I'm not an attorney. I don't know what the path would be, but that's the heart of it. And if we could actually see some of these criminals imprisoned or after a trial by a jury of their peers executed, we might see a diminution of the power of the cryptocracy for the first time, because they can't sell to their potential recruits that they are immune from prosecution. And that would be very important. This is just practical shoe leather methods that we need to use rather than just being out in cloud nine talking about the occult symbolism here. Sometimes people obsess too much about that and it ends up to sum total of nothing.
So, you talk about the occult a lot. Yuri Bevanov was a famous ex-KGB guy who was breaking down the demoralization of any country and how to do it. And one of the plays is to get it so the population doesn't trust its leaders. Do you think we're full on into that right now? Well,
yes and no, because most of our leaders at the federal level are not worthy of trust. So,
I agree, man. I agree.
So when it's fact-based, I mean, I hate to see a shibboleth put up there to which we have to line up behind, the idea that we're undermining faith in our leaders. If our leaders are worthy of faith, I had faith in, I was a little kid when Kennedy was assassinated, but that affected me tremendously for the whole of my life, right up to this day. And looking at his record, and I know a lot of the problems and some of the sins he committed and so forth, but I had faith in his vision, and I believe that's again why he was assassinated. And I have faith in other people. I had faith in Pat Buchanan's campaign, and there are people who are worthy of faith. Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Certainly, we should be behind them. But when you have Donald Trump, who, according to Joe Kent, former director of counterintelligence for the U.S. government, insinuated that Trump's policies and his turning around and betraying a lot of his campaign promises are due to his fear of assassination. And he insinuated that fear was coming from the Mossad, the Israeli assassination bureau, one of the best in the world, the most effective in the world. That's highly interesting to me. But at the same time, I like to think, and maybe it's easy for me to say in my little headquarters here in North Idaho, but I like to think that whether I was the Pope or the president, and it was noised abroad that I was under threat of assassination, that I would take that to the American people, that I would go on at 8:00 on all the news channels and say, you know what, I've received credible intelligence that if I stand for America first, which was my pledge to you, the American people, either myself or my family could be assassinated. Which, by the way, Kent mentioned that also Trump was in fear of his family being harmed. And then go from there. challenge the American people to stand behind you. As a Catholic, I've often heard, well, the Pope couldn't come out to do this or do that because he was under fear of assassination. Allegedly, Pope John Paul I was assassinated. Well, then the Pope should do the same thing. Go to the church and say, I'm under this threat. Are you going to stand with me? Are you going to help me? Instead of, just figuring that the cryptocracy has all the power. They don't. They are far more vulnerable than we can imagine. The idea that they're a satanic majesty, which is largely infallible, is absolutely wrong. I've seen them make many mistakes, and their gambling has left them open to tremendous risk. But when you do that, when you're a high roller and you do that, then the benefits can be tremendous too. And the benefits have accrued to them because we haven't stood up. I do think there is starting to be an act of defiance. Because some of the things that Tucker Carlson has been saying, what you say on your show, Rogan has done some great things too. And, all of this can put some stiffness in the spines of the American people and say, if these guys are risking it, I'm going to risk it as well. That's the kind of movement that I would like to be part of, or even lead if possible. Let's see where it goes.
You bring up a really good point. You brought up a couple times about demanding perfection. It's an old Thomas Sowell quote. I'm paraphrasing it. I don't have it exactly, but like, in a society that demands perfection, only liars can thrive. And it just seems like we're constantly taking people down for things that really shouldn't matter to us, especially things that they do in their private life. Maybe we don't necessarily agree with it, but it doesn't seem to be important in the big picture if you're fighting for truth and justice and all that stuff. And I think that's a really good point. This society where we're like, on one hand, we're pushing all this debaucherous behavior and everything like that. And then on the other hand, when somebody we don't like participates in that stuff, and like, I'm not including pedophilia in what I'm talking about. That's disgusting and should be called out. So we're going to set that aside to what we're talking about here. But when someone participates in things that society has been pushing as like almost a unicorn, right? Like, oh, you're just so mystical and magical, and then they participate in it, they end up getting taken out for that same thing that has been pushing our culture all the time. And it's really kind of sad because you'll never get a good person in there. And the one thing I will say about Trump, and there's a lot to criticize about Trump, is that he seems to be the guy that I heard about out of New York and Atlantic City all the time. That, we had such hopes because he told us what we wanted to hear, that that his like true colors come out. And it seems kind of crazy to me. And are there things that Trump does that I like? Yeah, I mean, I'll risk it because it seems like if you think anything that Trump does, even on a basic level of he's pretty funny, he says funny things, right? You even say that, you seem to get excommunicated by a part of society. But there are things I like that he does, but there are a lot of bigger things that I don't like that he does that really taints the whole thing to me. But I totally agree with you. This idealism of purity that we put on people that are entering an extremely corrupt game that's called politics. And we run off really good people because they're not perfect to us, even though they do things that we preach all the time that are spiritually, noble. And it's very weird to me. And I think it's kind of sad. One thing I wanted to start with, because we are coming on July 4th. Our birthday.
Well, can I just wanted to address what you raised, if that's okay, if we can.
Yeah, totally. 100%. 100%.
I think that what we've lost is the concept of redemption. I mean, so many people claim to be Christians, but they forget that Jesus came for sinners, not for the saved. And so a guy can have a horrible life for 20 or 30 years, and then he turns it all around. In the Catholic world, it's Dorothy Day, who had an abortion and was leaning towards communism. And then she founded this wonderful movement, the Catholic Worker Movement. It was a hospitality movement for the homeless in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. It's still alive today. That was the process of Christ's redemption in her life. And if we become Pharisees and everyone has to have this perfectionist principle, of course, which, as you say, our own culture doesn't practice, that's a huge divide. It's a schizophrenic divide, which undermines our psychological health. The other thing is, Sam, is that so many people, rightly or wrongly, and in some cases they have grounds for it, are infuriated and they go around all the time angry. It's part of the psychological deterioration of people. They've been wronged by the government. They've been wronged by different factors, political movements. And so they're in this state of arousal. And then you come across them, and I run across this a great deal, maybe you do as well. They agree with you 95% of what you're saying. But because you strongly dissent from 5% of their cherished views, they cast you off into outer darkness.
I agree.
Yes.
And so I've heard people say, well, Tucker Carlson, he's a psyop or he's an agent. Or, well, on what basis do you say that? I mean, where is the forensic data? Where is the empirical data to back this up other than your hunch? And so I think that if we're going to have a movement, there has to be a certain charity in it. And there has to be a certain forgiveness there that we carry with us. And without that, again, we're divided, and there are hidden forces behind that are actually propelling that.
So we want to get into kind of the talking points you came in about America 250. You kind of got into a little earlier, but I wanted to talk about like the good and the bad of the constitutional approach to slavery, kind of like within the dark side of the American Revolution and George Washington, the Federalist faction and all that. You kind of touched on that, but I wanted to get a little bit more into it because we have this thing where this thing that happened 250 years ago or however long ago, which was an awful thing, which is slavery. You have one side that can't forget that. Then there's the extremes of that side who want, to be paid for, for the slavery that they never went through, while simultaneously ignoring open air slave trades that are happening in Libya right now that was brought on by Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and John McCain. And it's very interesting to me how those two things can exist. I see it in comedy in LA all the time, exist together, excuse me. You have black comedians constantly talking about buying slaves for $400. And I'm not like I'm not somebody who's like, oh, my pearl clutcher. I'm like, oh my goodness, how could you do that? That's not me at all. But it just seems like just the most hypocrisy I've ever seen in my life, where you refuse to move on from something that happened 250 years ago. But yet you're now making jokes about that exact same thing to people who are alive and breathing the same air that you're breathing right now. What are your whole thoughts on slavery, the history of slavery, all that stuff, or any of that you want to get into?
Well, that's a good point. And I think that one of the reasons why Black people are insisting on this reparations movement, even though they're hundreds of years separated from, the actual enslavement, is probably some resentment about the reparations that they see the Israelis and Zionists demanding out of Germany decades and decades after the end of the persecution and mass murder of the Judaic people in World War II. And they wonder about that, and they glance on it. And we now have sort of like sanctified categories now, such as I'm the grandchild of a Holocaust survivor. Pretty soon we're going to see I'm the great nephew of a Holocaust survivor. So, everybody in society who's demanding special privileges as a result of their identity is really destructive of the whole idea of America. And so I think that we have to factor in that Black people, many of the most astute ones, and with whom I've had conversations, are aware of this. When are the Germans going to stop paying reparations for World War II, and then we're getting nothing? So I think that's something that should be studied and looked at. And one of the things that one of the revisionist facts that I raise about the Black slave struggle for freedom in alliance with the British is that we have to understand that I'm not trying to say that America is corrupt in its inheritance, and that's very special, that distinction, because people can say, okay, Hoffman, you're actually noting that it was hypocritical of the founders to do this, to proclaim liberty for themselves and not for Black people. Well, I think that if you look at the Constitution, the kernel of that liberty for Black people was coming. It was built into the Constitution. And I'll talk about that. And it's a subject for debate, and I think it is debatable, but I think the consensus is starting to emerge that it was there. For example, the 1808 ban on the international slave trade, which went into effect in 1808. That was it. America was no longer part of that. And this was revolutionary for its time. But one of the things I want to point out, when the left is talking about whether it's apartheid in South Africa, which was certainly a crime, or what was done to black people in America, which was certainly a crime. I deny none of that. But the woke perspective is predicated almost entirely on the exclusion of the record of the crimes, bloodshed, warfare, and corruption, which was occurring in other parts of the world at the same time or in recent history. So when we factor in what whites did to blacks, are we factoring in what Aztecs did to the other allied tribes in pre-Columbian Mexico, where a whole civilization was sustained on human sacrifice?
Yeah.
The Aztecs were a culture obsessed with death. They believed that human sacrifice was the highest form of karmic healing. When their Great Pyramid was consecrated in 1487, the Aztecs recorded that 84,000 people were slaughtered in 4 days. And there's a wonderful book by David Graeber and David Wengrow called The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity. And the data they marshal consists of new evidence of the relentless genocide, slavery, and occult diabolism perpetrated by native nations in the Western Hemisphere against each other. So, we get this notion that before Columbus came, it was paradise. And that, the Indian tribes lived, maybe they had a few wars and things like that. But, after all, they had the martial virtues. They were warriors, the mystic warriors of the plains, the Comanches are referred to, and so forth. But what they were relentless victimizers of their own people. Tribal warfare was the rule of the day, both before Columbus arrived and long afterward. They slaves, they massacred each other. I could go on about the Aboriginal societies in the Northwest Coast. I live here in the Pacific Northwest. The slaves that were taken, a whole empire built on slavery. So if we're going to talk about American slavery, the American Constitution, everything else, then let's remember the hypocrisy of various Native Americans who either don't know their history and therefore they're not being insincere because they're ignorant, although ignorance is no excuse, but they don't know their history, or they're covering up the fact that they do not have this blameless utopian type of society that existed here, and only the white pioneers ruined it. So that has to be factored in. And Samuel Johnson, who was living in Great Britain at the time of the American Revolution, a great writer. If you want to become a great writer, read Samuel Johnson and you'll become a great writer, because just learning from the way he arranged his syntax and his vocabulary and his style. And so he said it was very hypocritical of the American founders to seek freedom from themselves without seeking to free the slaves. He said, how is it that we hear the loudest yelps for liberty among the drivers of Negroes? Okay. The thing is that the justly famous wordsmith Samuel Johnson, in his pamphlet, he's talking about the driving of Negroes by the American revolutionaries. Well, he was writing in the midst of the driving of many thousands of the poor of England into starving to death on the streets of London, while Johnson stepped over their bodies on his way to the coffee house. And he also seems to have neglected the blazing datum that King George III presided over a global slave empire. And it was the Americans who were really the first to have this abolitionist agitation. And in fact, the Constitution's alleged facilitation of the Atlantic slave trade amounted to authoring Congress to abolish it, as I said, in 1808. And all but two of the states, North Carolina and Georgia, had already taken it on their own to do that. And so between 1786 and 1795, the years more in line with the Constitution's framing, an estimated 16,922 enslaved Africans arrived in the U.S. That is not an enormous number. It was already being suppressed, and it was done as a result of the anti-slavery organizations that were influencing the American Constitution, such as the Society for the Relief of Free Negroes, unlawfully held in bondage, which met in Worcester, Massachusetts. There were all kinds of petitions. The Constitution conceded to the slaveholding states a measure of extra representation in Congress and the Electoral College, although it was far from determinative, and it gave them a weakly worded clause on returning their fugitive slaves. But the convention majority refused to acknowledge slavery's legitimacy in national law. So many, if not most, of the prominent abolitionists abolitionists, including the very important physician, the signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he was secretary of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, Benjamin Rush, hailed the Constitution, and in particular its provisions on the slave trade, as auguring the commencement of slavery's demise and eradication. So this is something that we have to understand. Another writer remarked that in this country, we should, in less than 150 years, possess a degree of liberality and humanity which will see the end of the slave trade. And that's exactly what happened. Even though Lincoln is considered a villain by many paleo-conservatives and so forth, you could not have slavery continuing into the 1860s, which was what was occurring. And remember, Sam, there wasn't just, among Black people, it wasn't just slaves. There was a category known as the freemen. And the freemen were free Black people, some of whom even held Black slaves in the 19th century in America. But for those free people, free whites and a minority of free Blacks, there was something called the Free Soil Party. And what it agitated for was free labor in the American West. This golden era, this golden land of opportunity, which epitomized the egalitarian dynamism that the American Revolution launched, which is why people were magnetically attracted here. And what did the slave owners want to do? They wanted to put Black slave plantations in California, in Oregon. What would have happened? What happened to the white working class in antebellum South? They had to compete against very skilled slave labor. Blacks were bricklayers, stonemasons, carpenters at a very high level, and they had to compete against that. Well, you can't compete against slave labor. And so white poverty in the South was really onerous. And so this was one of the main reasons why whites joined the Union Army. It wasn't really to emancipate Black people in many cases. Perhaps later on, toward the end of the war, they felt that way. Originally, it was to keep the West open for free labor. And the American constitutionalists actually talked about that. I found a very unremarked upon statement on the eve of Lord Dunmore recruiting Blacks into his Ethiopian regiment for the British Army. I found that Washington and Jefferson and others had spoken directly to this idea that at some point we have to end slavery in order to protect free labor. Now, whether they had in mind free white labor or not, that's what they talked about. And then for some reason that faded out of existence, perhaps from their own avarice, owning so many slaves and not wanting to be involved in abolition. But nonetheless, it was that emancipation was made possible by what was in the Constitution. Frederick Douglass himself, the great civil rights advocate during the Lincoln era, said that he celebrated the existence of the Constitution and what it was set up to do this. There's no way that the Constitution entrenched slavery in America. It understood it was an evil, and the left continues to be blind on that aspect. I think in many cases from just irrational anti-white racism against whites. And I'm going to follow the trail of evidence wherever it leads. If that was true, then I would indict these people, but it's not true. And I think we have to keep that in mind. And also the fact that, as Gordon S. Wood and others have said, the greatest generation that has been seen in this country is the American Revolutionary generation. And we don't have enough gratitude. One of the worst things you can have is an ungrateful child or an ungrateful student or an ungrateful husband or wife. And much of the animus against the American founders is due to a lack of gratitude. What this gift that they gave us, and if it wasn't really a gift, then why is so much of the world attracted to come here and live?
It is crazy to me. It's crazy.
Jesus said, "By their fruits ye shall know them." Well, the fruits of the founders of this country have been fabulous.
Boom, boom, boom. Let's go back to the room where I can make you feel right, and we can do it all night. Guess what, guys? The only way you're going to do it all night is with Blue Chew Gold. Bah, 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 bah. Guys, sex is back on the table or the counter or the bed or wherever you do it, okay? Thanks to Blue Chew Gold. The new arousal boosting formula from the #1 better sex brand, Blue Chew, is making bedrooms noisy again, and it doesn't just get you hard. It gets you aroused, horny, turned on. Got performance anxiety? Say goodbye to your little friend. Not with this. Blue Chew Gold quiets the noise so you can handle your business. When you take Blue Chew, get ready to meet your new dick. He's confident, walks in the room with a chin up, okay? Makes eye contact. Stuff is crazy. I think mine talks, okay? He's the cock of the walk, if you know what I mean, and you know what I mean. Knock, knock. Who's there? Knock, 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 knock. Ring the doorbell, ring the doorbell. That's the sound of your bedpost when you use a Blue Chew. Okay, Blue Chew Gold is better sex in a tablet. They combine 4 ingredients into one powerful solution. 2 ingredients get you hard physically, and 2 support arousal and desire in the brain. It works fast and lasts. Guys, have a complete experience in the bedroom with Blue Chew Gold, okay? There's a reason why Blue Chew is the #1 brand for better sex. Experience it yourself at BlueChew.com. And we got a special deal for our listeners. Guys, brace yourself for impact. Right now, when you buy 2 months of Blue Chew Gold, you get a 3rd one free with promo code TINFOIL. That's promo code TINFOIL. You will receive an additional 10% off and free overnight shipping on your first order. Okay, visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank all of us, everyone that works on the show, we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the pod and the bedroom. Amazing. All right, guys, real quick, go to samtripoli.com to get my dates. I'm going to be in Miami. Then I'm going to be at Joke World Comedy Festival in St. Petersburg, Lawerence, Kansas, Tulsa, TrutherCon in Dallas, New Orleans for Skankfest, Austin. And then if you go to samtripoli.com, you can get on my mailing list. Please join my mailing list real quick. Please join my mailing list right there. Bang, bang, pow. All right, guys. Let's get back to it. It's kind of crazy how, people, I see this particularly with the left. You'll get in a conversation with them. They'll make their statement. You'll provide evidence to them of where their statement's not true. And you can even say it's to the far right as well. They make a statement about their beliefs. You present evidence that counter their beliefs, and then they just detach. And it's like they'd rather be right than do right. And the do right is to admit that they were wrong. And for some reason, nobody can do that. It's very crazy to me that you see these upper class that are so hell-bent on socialism, so hell-bent on communism. Why communist countries and socialist countries in Latin America are now opening their markets to capitalism, okay? And yet they still push this thing that in these other countries is completely dying off. Completely dying off. They've tried it, and you get the people like that, like we did. We had another show where someone in the comment section is like, "That's not true communism." I'm like, "Where is the true communism? Will they ever allow true communism? Communism to happen?" Because they've never allowed it to happen. Why would they allow it to happen?
He was
here,
talking.
especially?
It was being done. He was talking about Marx's final stage of, which is the stateless society, which we're 10 steps from that. And we've never even approached that, and we never will, because humans by nature are greedy and
egotistical and psychopath, and you'll always have an alpha that wants to run everything, and it eventually becomes. It's very funny that they want to get rid. They want to get rid of authority while creating a system that just solidifies power under authority. I mean, you have Mandani right now trying to open up a government grocery stores, which is going to run out private mom and pop grocery stores because they can operate at a loss. That is the city gaining power. I don't understand how you don't realize that. It's crazy to me. And they live in a fantasy land, and it's not even about being right. It's just about being seen as being on the right team, saying the right things. That's why they say the crazy stuff on the internet. So when they're trying to get a job in Hollywood, some casting director looks them up and they see them saying the most ridiculous things. They know they're part of the team. Oh yeah, bring him in. We like what he has to say. And it just ends up being ridiculous. It's crazy to me. Well, when you see history play out, how people like to ignore it, especially people who have, since the moment they took their first breath in life, have been at the best hospitals, the best gated communities, the best schools, the best colleges, the best internships, the best work, the best jobs, the best restaurants, the best private clubs. There hasn't been a one time where they've actually touched grass and felt like what the real world's like. And it's very crazy to me. And it's just this, it's like I always say, LA is drowning in trust fund kids right now. There's too many trust fund kids that wake up every morning needing purpose in their life. And their purpose is to, get back at their fathers and their grandfathers who thrived in a capitalist system. And yeah, do we have perfect capitalism right now? Of course not. We have crony capitalism. Elon Musk is a trillionaire, not anymore, but he was for a brief second. He was a trillionaire based off government contracts. That's corporate socialism to me. That's not compete. You and I can't create a rocket system to compete with Elon Musk. You need all that government money, which is handouts. I'm sorry, maybe not everyone agrees with that, but that's how I see it. You're competing against billionaires getting government contracts, a government that prints so much money, it has unlimited money. That's what we're looking at right now. But it's like no one can see any of that. No one can see any of that. This podcast itself was built from scratch and, created so great people like Michael could come on and share his knowledge with us. And it's found a place in the marketplace. That's capitalism. And they want to get rid of all that because they just are so mad their dads didn't hug them enough. And if you're a rich dad, hug your kids. Stop a communism. Hug your kids. That's what you do. Tell them every day that you love them. Yeah. So it's just crazy times to me, Michael.
I think one thing I'd like to point out is that for some really big projects, you are inevitably going to rely on the deep-pocketed people, whether it's called the government or not. I always remember when Dennis Hopper was asked, the Hollywood actor and director, about how he was raising money for Easy Rider, and he was speaking in the hippie lingo at the time. He said, "Man, if you want to paint the big ceiling, you got a deal." And what he was referencing was Michelangelo, with one of the most remarkable artistic works in the history of the West, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel and the altar paintings behind it. And that he had to deal with those popes, and each pope there were various popes who passed on while he was doing his work. Each one was backed sometimes by a murderous family who hated the other papal family. And he had to sort of walk that line in order to paint that big ceiling. So I think we have to factor that in. But one of the things I think that you're raising is the ideological divide. And without wanting to get too abstruse here, I think there's an epistemological issue, if we can put not too fine a point on it, which is that is history existential or is it chronological? And I'm concerned with the documentary record and its chronology, and not these existential issues that motivate and fire up the left and the right. And I'll quote from Wallace Stegner when he wrote, "I was on my grandparents' side. I believe in time as they did, and in the life chronological rather than in the life existential. We live in time and through it, and we build our huts in its ruins, or we used to, and we cannot afford all these abandonings." So my own kind of manifesto has been that I will not abandon fidelity to the record for the sake of any ideology, for any conception of the existential need trumping the integrity of documentary history and similar doctrinaire nonsense. So I think that one of the things that I want to point out here is about Thomas Jefferson. And, we were saying that he's a slaveholder, and there was hypocrisy here about what he said and in terms of what he actually practiced. My mother used to say, do as I say, not as I do. She was deliberate in, taking her parental authority and impressing that on us, but she also understood the humor of it. And so people accuse Jefferson of that. But what I'd like to point out is that our future president made his low assessment of Black people reluctantly with many qualifications. And one could almost say in the fear of God. If you read carefully how he puts forth his views, if you'll just indulge me for a moment, this is from his notes on the state of Virginia. Quote, "The opinion that they, the Negroes, are inferior in the faculties of reason and imagination must be hazarded with great dissidence. To justify a general conclusion requires many observations. Let me add, too, as a circumstance of great tenderness, where our conclusion would degrade a whole race of men, from the rank in the scale of beings which their creator may perhaps have given them. So he's not sure whether he's doing right here by saying that maybe they're not quite human. He's a little bit afraid of what that portends. So to our reproach, it must be said, continuing now with Jefferson's statement, that though for a century and a half we have had under our eyes the races of black and of red men, they have never yet been viewed by us as subjects of natural history, meaning science. That's what they called science back then. I advance it, therefore, as a suspicion only that the blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to the whites in the endowments both of body and mind. Okay, end quote. So, wow, look at what he's saying, inferior to the whites in the endowments of body and mind. Now, observe the humility and indeterminacy with which Jefferson approached his evaluation. He hazarded with great dissidence a circumstance of great tenderness. I advance it as a suspicion only. So Jefferson was not establishing a dogma. He was not doing much more than thinking aloud while making allowance for his error. And in the fear of daring to deny to black people the imago Dei, that is the image of God, which he set forth in the Declaration. He's saying that where our conclusion would degrade a whole race of men, he's worried about that. He doesn't want that. He knows how grave it is to do such a thing. These early views of our third president, you remember earlier we were talking about redemption. He redeemed himself. These were made in 1781. Now, a leftist could seize on that, cast it in concrete, and say that's the alpha and omega of Thomas Jefferson. But he did not intend it as a doctrine. This intellectual of the Christian Enlightenment wrote his words mindful that they were conditional upon his further observation and study. So 28 years later, we discover the happy fact when we read the letter he penned in 1809 to Henri Gregor, quote, I received the favor of your letter of August 17th and with the volume you were so kind to send me on the literature of the Negroes. He's been given books written by black people, poetry, so forth. Be assured that no person living wishes more sincerely than I do to see a complete refutation of the doubts I myself have entertained and expressed on the grade of understanding allotted to them by nature, and to find that in this respect they are on par with ourselves. My doubts were the result of personal observation on the limited sphere of my own state, where the opportunities for the development of their genius were not favorable, and those of exercising it still so. So he's saying that slavery held them back from showing forth their genius. I expressed them, therefore, with great hesitation, but whatever be their degree of talent, it is no measure of their rights. Because Sir Isaac Newton was superior to others in understanding, he was not, therefore, lord of the person or property of others. And I'll conclude with this. On this subject, the Negroes are gaining daily in the opinions of nations, and hopeful advances are making towards their reestablishment on an equal footing with the other colors of the human family. I pray you, therefore, to accept my thanks for the many instances you have enabled me to observe respectable intelligence in that race of black men, which cannot fail to have effect in hastening the day of their relief, and to be assured of the sentiments of high and just esteem and consideration which I tender. End quote from Thomas Jefferson. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, you could weep at the nature of his soul, that when he saw the facts, okay, when he saw the chronology, the documentary record, not the existential aspect of an ideology of racism, he dumped the whole thing and was a cheerleader for the success of black people, finally acknowledging their full humanity based on what he had perceived. And this is what we need to concede to other human beings. If you don't see it yet, you will see it later. But it has to be based on a scientific, empirical study of facts rather than an ideology which is pushing us towards capitalism, conservatism, communism, or the woke. And again, for me, Jefferson has rehabilitated himself and emphasized this redemptive factor, which is so important for Christians to express. And I certainly hope we all embrace that at some point.
Yeah, the right to grow and change. And your belief, like even on this show itself, things that I believed in episode 1, I do not believe anymore. Somebody wanted me to write a book about my spiritual beliefs. And like halfway through, I decided this is not a good idea because my beliefs are constantly changing. And for me to put out something in a paper and finalize it when at some point I may no longer believe this, I think that would be dangerous. And it is, we must allow people growth and change. We must allow them to have beliefs. There's been movies made. There was a famous movie about the guy who was had the Klan and he had to work with a black woman on creating the conditions of the elections in local areas. And when they both came in, they both hated each other. And by the time they were done, they had come together and realized they were more alike than they were different. And he denounced it, being a part. He quit the Klan and denounced their beliefs. And now you would be judging him on what he was from before. And I think it's absolutely dangerous and ridiculous. And again, if we get into this kind of idea that our society demands perfection, it's why so many of these content creators who go hard right and hard left, it turns out in their real life, they're not that person. And then they lose everything because, again, in a society that demands perfection, only liars can thrive. And I think you have to give people a real opportunity to change who they are and what they believe. And I think that was a beautiful reading by you. And I really appreciate you sharing that. Now, one of the notes that you said, if we could, you had talked about how a lot of the slaves had gone and fought for the British. Mm-hmm. What is your thoughts about that? And what do you think that means?
Well, I'll tell you the end of the story before I start at the beginning. The end of the story is, in many ways, they were utterly betrayed. For example, apart from Lord Dunmore's Ethiopian regiment in Virginia, there was another contingent in Georgia, which was associated with the Tories or Loyalists, those Americans who sided with the crown. And at first, those Tories were winning battles. And then eventually, as more American forces went down to Georgia, which was largely an outrider in terms of the history of the American Revolution, not a particularly important constituent factor. But as the Patriots began to dominate, then the British were losing. What did they do with the former slaves who they had promised freedom to? They shipped them into the West Indies and Barbados and islands like that, where in large part, the enslavement was more oppressive than what it was in America. So it was an absolute betrayal. Later on, you saw something less onerous in the War of 1812, where again, black slaves left their chains and fought for the British. And there was some amelioration of their condition in terms of sending some of them to the British Isles or some of them to free areas in the world where they would not be slaves. But largely, it was a terrible betrayal. I bring up the issue of blacks fighting for Lord Dunmore, for example, who was a more interesting character. And I think in his own, he had some experience with oppression because his own father was a Jacobite rebel when Bonnie Prince Charlie, who was a descendant of the grandson of the last Stuart King of England, who had been really largely railroaded out of his position because the elite were afraid he had Catholic sympathies and would try to relieve the oppression against Catholics, which was going on at that time. So anyway, there was a rebellion in the 18th century, as you know, and they were absolutely crushed. His father was almost killed, the third Lord of Dunmore. And then so William, the son, went on to try to earn George III's graces by then becoming first Royal Governor of New York, which he liked, and then Royal Governor of Virginia, which he originally did not. He was an early friend of George Washington, by the way, but he had a fairer sense of what was going on with the black people and tried his best to fulfill the promises that the British had made. But even that didn't work out in terms of basically because the victory, Virginia was the largest and most powerful colony. And they also had a history of obstreperous. When you talk about the mountain men, the stereotypes about the mountain men or an American militia, they're actually fulfilled in these very formidable musketeers and riflemen who were there. And they were not a force to be trifled with. There's a famous statement by one of the British commanders of the British Army, and he was asked about his rough and tough working class troops. And he was asked whether or not they would frighten the French. And he said, "I think so. By God, they frightened me." And one could say the same thing about the American militia at that time. They were used in the French and Indian War to great effect under the command of George Washington, who was a British officer at that time. I've had my English friends tell me that Washington was such a good commander because he learned it from the British, but that was their own chauvinism in that case. But, yeah, that's what they say. But so from there, Dunmore, the Native Americans, they were unjustly having their land stolen from them and so many treaties violated. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, as Jefferson mentions in the Declaration of Independence, and there's a controversy brewing right now about his one line that he said, the only known form of warfare by the savages, as he called them, was the murder of every station and aid. In other words, old people, the sick, children, it didn't matter. And he actually enshrined that in the Declaration. To a certain extent, that was true. And in many cases, the depredations by whites fighting them was also savage. But nonetheless, Dunmore had led these militiamen and these mountaineers, fiercely independent guys. I mean, I really admire their independence, true human beings in so many ways. And he led them against the Shawnee at the time, and it was an utter defeat. Shawnee had a great Indian chief by the name of Cornstalk, who was much admired for his oratorical abilities. His son was kept as a hostage as peace negotiations went on. But what my point here is that these militiamen and these frontiersmen and mountaineers, when they heard about the blacks revolting, they had the early conception that Jefferson had, that these were not fully human beings and that they should be satisfied with the fact that at least they're enslaved. And it sounds risible now, but they should be satisfied with the fact that they're enslaved in America, not in Africa, under reasonably benign conditions, which wasn't true. Most of the conditions were horrible, but this was their sense of it. So that when Dunmore announces his Ethiopian regiment, probably nothing galvanized the rage of the colonists more against the British than that fact, because they saw it as a kind of race treason, that the British were white and they were right. Why would they incite these insurrections when at the same time the British were the largest enslavers of white people in Western empires? I'm not suggesting that Africa wasn't larger, but in terms of how the West was enslaving, and they would never want that in their own provinces. So here was an accusation of hypocrisy, and that also worked both ways, cut both ways. And so there are so many nuances here that we have to take a scalpel to and pull these layers apart. And again, that existential urge for an ideological, pure assessment of this is always a product of propaganda. When you're looking at an ideology, whether it's left wing or right wing, there's always going to be a Machiavellian modification of facts, to put it mildly. And that's what we're seeing on both sides. And that's why I don't have a side in this. And
me too.
I have my own. I'm a product of my upbringing, my culture, my education, my religion. So naturally, I'm not free of prejudging or biases, but I try to militate against those. And I try to do what many people are not doing today. I mean, when I get someone to quit subscribing to my Substack column, it's often because they feel that I have not confirmed their bias. The reason.
Yes.
They signed up for my column because they heard some rumor about me, he's anti-Zionist or he's pro-white or whatever. And when they find that I'm not confirming the biases that they brought to history, when they don't really know history, they get angry and they leave. And so confirmation bias is the absolute nemesis of true history writing. Every historian worth their salt has got to militate against that. And that's really been my vocation. Whether I've succeeded or not is up for my readers to decide. But that is my vocation. I consider it a God-given one.
So one thing that we hear a lot, this battlefield that is politics from the right, is that America was founded on Christian values. I consistently say that's not true at all. And I'd love to hear your opinion. It was founded on Freemason values. The way they designed Washington, D.C., all the symbolism and everything. Am I right? Am I close to what your research has shown?
What a great question. I'm so happy that you raised that, because it really does go to the heart of things, and it's often on people's minds. And so I'll take it as two parts. The first part, Christian America, and then the role of Freemasonry. I think that we have to understand and look at what we mean by a Christian America culturally and in terms of a kind of osmosis. So that, for example, Benjamin Franklin was born to a very strict puritanical family. I actually know the name of the minister, Samuel Willard, who baptized him in, what was it, 1700 or 1701 in Boston. And so even though I believe that he became anti-Christian sub rosa, clandestinely, as he proceeded onward into leading Masonic societies in France and the United States. But at the same time, his expression, his worldview was framed by his knowledge of the Bible and his immersion in that Bible as an 8, 10, and 12-year-old, which was almost total. And I think in more benign examples of that, for example, when the American revolutionaries were being told to be the soldiers, rough-hued, imagine these rough-hued soldiers at Valley Forge and elsewhere, being told to be content with their situation and the kind of hardship that they would have to bear. And they completed that sentence by quoting directly from the Bible, and be content with your pay, which is in the New Testament with relation to the military. That's how well they knew it. And so for me, it was a Christian revolution because the main people involved in it were steeped in the Bible, were steeped in the New Testament, were steeped in Christian values, whether they followed them or not, whether later on they developed a kind of distance from that. I think the prime example of that is Jefferson, who is largely said to be non-Christian or anti-Christian. That's absolutely not true. What it was is he was unfortunately a victim of the scientism of the day, which decreed that we know the natural world and we know the universe, and therefore there's no such thing as miracles. At the same time, the French National Science Society decreed that there was no such thing as meteors. They couldn't be possible, which is where Jefferson's dictum "error has rights" comes in, because if you're advocating the existence of meteors, then, and you're considered to be in error, you better have protection so that the truth at some point will come out. And in Jefferson's case, he didn't believe in miracles, so he created his famous Jefferson Bible, and I have a facsimile of that. He just took out the miracles, but he otherwise affirmed Jesus' sentiments and philosophy and doctrine of benevolence. He considered it the greatest philosophy that was ever promoted in the world. And he died in the good graces of the Episcopal Church and had an Episcopal funeral. But my point is that whether you're Sam Adams or you're Ethan Allen, who actually was anti-religious, and yet when he knocked on the door of Fort Ticonderoga, he said, "Open up in the name of the Continental Congress and the great God Jehovah." So we today, who don't have one half the education in the Bible and the New Testament, not one half is steeped in this philosophy of Christianity, we can't really understand the extent to which, even if you were somewhat doubting and skeptical, or you didn't go to church or whatever, in your alpha and omega of your worldview, it really was Christian. They had nothing else to compare it to. Now, on this, to me, overworked theme of a Freemasonic conspiracy behind the American Revolution, I think what we have to look at is, and I was talking about this with Kurt Metzger yesterday, is that the idea that we had a movement here in America. I'm a child of the 1970s, so even though we talk a lot about the 60s was the parent to, it was a blossoming of what actually came to fruition in the 1970s. And that was the hippie movement, which came along with all of its problems and hypocrisies and so forth. But so you had all kinds of people who are now in their 60s and 70s who were hippies in that era. And they smoked pot and they engaged in orgies and they were in communes, and they thought that maybe the end was coming, the system was going to fall. And then they sobered up after a few years, especially in the 1980s. You saw short hair back. I remember a reporter talking about how he had long hair and he went to cover a Ku Klux Klan meeting or protest or something. And all the guys in the Klan had shoulder length hair and longer. And that was the day he cut his hair off, because he realized it had co-opted even the Klan, this sort of some, vestiges of the hippie movement. And so many of those people, originally hippies, repudiated a lot of the lying and the deceit. So many guys just wanting to take sexual advantage of women and claiming to be they were prophets and so forth. And they became useful citizens. Many of my friends who were that way in the 1970s turned out to be great folks and in many cases, great Christians. I think the same thing was going on with Freemasonry. Remember, exoterically. It was only born in 1717 in London. So it's just a matter of decades when it came into existence. Sam, what was its advertising slogan? Its advertising slogan was, and it was a false one, that we are tolerationists. We don't get involved in all of the internecine conflicts and fratricidal wars of the Catholics and the Protestants. This is an open search for the truth based on ancient wisdom from Egypt and other sources like that. Come and join us. And that had magnetic attraction for the founders, who really were in great trepidation that the new world would become like the old world, and we would see the type of fratricidal warfare and bloodshed, which killed hundreds of thousands of people in Europe, brought over here. And so Freemasonry seemed to be an antidote to that. And in fact, it was the exact opposite. It was a priesthood and a church far stricter than the Church of Rome, as I try to set out in my book, Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare in particular, which Jim Keith was very big on, that particular aspect of it. But anyhow, so here you have the hypocrisy of the Freemasons. They murdered William Morgan in 1826 after he published a book on the 3 degrees of Freemasonry. He was a former Mason. They attempted to burn down the presses where that book was printed in Batavia, New York. Later on, earlier, they had in Philadelphia, they had killed a dissident Mason, and I believe that Benjamin Franklin was implicated in that murder. And I have attempted to contact the various hagiographers of Franklin. They call themselves biographers, but they're actually hagiographers of Franklin. Say, tell me how you're going to exculpate him for the clear evidences, and some circumstantial it is, that he was involved in that murder. And they never go there. They avoid it like the plague. And that's of interest to me. And then also, of course, one of the most interesting characters in the early 19th century, I spoke earlier on the 42nd degree line that various religious movements which shook America in the 19th century happened along that line in upstate New York. And one of those was the Church of Latter-day Saints of Joseph Smith, the Mormons. Well, Smith was a former Freemason who was incorporating the secrets of the lodge in his Masonic priesthood, and he was murdered at the old Carthage jail in Illinois by a Masonic mob. So gradually, many Americans, especially John Quincy Adams, and also the circle around Abraham Lincoln, Thurlow Weed, and his absolutely great Secretary of State, William Seward, all got their start in politics and journalism as the anti-Mason party, which after the murder of William Morgan in 26 had come to be a significant factor in American politics. And they were surrounding Lincoln, whereas the Confederate South was very much allied with Freemasonry. And when you're allied with Freemasonry, Freemasonry is Kabbalah for Gentiles. So you're also allied with the deeper aspects of that conspiracy, which many aficionados and enthusiasts for the Confederacy don't really see or realize. So I think that what you're talking about later on, the design of Washington, D.C., and that hideous Great Seal of the United States with the pyramid on it and all like that, the dull emblem of a Masonic fraternity, one of the professors at Harvard who was anti-Masonic stated, that all came afterwards, and it was an attempt by the cryptocracy to hitch its wagon to what I think was a fundamentally pure movement.
Interesting. That's great. Thank you for that. Wow. That was very, so I want to get into some of you talk about, real quick question. So I've been saying this, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it, that sorcery is real. Okay. And there's a lot of different forms of sorcery. Some of it is Kabbalah, some of it is Freemasonry, some of it is the Jesuit order. But at the end of the day, it all kind of leads to the same thing. Do you have any thoughts on that, Michael?
Well, there's a theory, and it's very strong in the New Age, that all religions have the same root. And there's various names for it. One is Prisca Theologia. And both right-wing neo-Nazi types were very much enamored of it. Miguel Serrano in Chile, for example, and many others. And of course, on the left and in the New Age, that's definitely, in the Gnostic movement, that's definitely a plank of theirs. So you're having this notion that there was a common fund of wisdom and knowledge. And of course, they try to blacken Christianity by putting that into the mix. And that's where Gnosticism comes in to say that there's these secret gospels and they actually show that Jesus was an occultist and so forth. Actually, the Bible and Jesus are the one absolutely isolated strain of a philosophy, or more than that, a divine revelation apart from everything else which is implicated in that soup of Prisca Theologia. And in Prisca Theologia, it's inherently occult, meaning that it's inherently diabolic. Because if you look at ancient Egypt, and before that, of course, there's Sumer, but we know that, the empire of Sumer, Sumer, but we have so much more documentation on Egypt and Babylon, which came out of it. And all of that was immersed in sorcery. As we know from all of the special wealth and riches that were invested in embalming, that it was a Thanatos cult. It was all oriented towards death. And that's where the money and the power was invested in. It was also oriented towards a notion that you could make statues speak and that you could compel God to do your bidding, which we see very strongly in the successor to Egyptian and Babylonian paganism, which is in the Kabbalah and the Talmud, where it is stated that God is defeated by the rabbis in defeat, and God celebrates it. He says, my sons have defeated me. My sons have defeated me. And so this is a sense that man and the suzerainty of man's brain power is supreme even over creation.
Yeah.
Because the fundamental Kabbalistic conceit is that God created a flawed creation deliberately, and that he requires human brain power to intercede and perfect his imperfect creation. Now, you can imagine what that does for the human ego, and we've seen what it's done for science, which continues to just plow forward on playing God to the greatest extent that they can. And that all is centered in this occult root. So yes, there is a sorcery, because in the Bible we see that as Moses is battling with the sorcerers of Egypt, the Bible concedes that they actually had power. They didn't have the divine power, but they had a power that they had been granted from their obeisance and the sacrifices they made to the demonic spirit. And from that, God permits, they're certainly not superior to God or even equal to him. This isn't a battle of any kind. Jesus won the battle when he went up on that cross. That was over. Satan was defeated. And then Jesus in turn defeated death. So it's not there isn't sort of any equal factor here. But yes, that's how man has been seduced, that there actually is a power that can be gained. It's a power that will destroy and shrivel your soul and will move humanity from the blessed destiny that Jesus intended for it into the living hell that we have today. And so I certainly have seen evidence of that. And when I looked at the Son of Sam case, for example, David Berkowitz, who was only one of the shooters there, there was a large cult and has yet to be completely plumbed to its depths. But nevertheless, he actually believed that he was going to be granted these powers, and he had seen some of those powers in others. And Aleister Crowley is another example that he was ultimately destroyed by it, but he had certain power granted to him. But a lot of this is so filthy, you almost can't talk about it with a family audience when you're talking about, the kind of rituals that Crowley derived from these sources that these primeval sources that I'm talking about.
I want to get into, and I don't want to keep you much longer because I love talking to you. It's an honor to have you on the show. You're such an encyclopedia of knowledge. I could listen to you all day. I want to get into revelation of the method. You've sent a couple of them, but if we could kind of get into some of the more interesting ones you've talked about. I want to get into female impersonators. We can get it. Well, let's start with denial of the unborn. It's very interesting. There was this post on social media, on Instagram, which stated that men are cause 98% of the murders, the crime, and all that stuff. And I'm not arguing against that. I believe that's be true, but that I just simply posted that in 2025, 70 million abortions happen. And that's all I said. I said, in 2025, 70 million abortions happen. And bro, people lost their mind. The SSRI army went crazy on me, and I just couldn't stop laughing. What are your thoughts on all that? Because you mentioned that in the revelation of the method you wanted to talk about.
Well, God is no respecter of persons. So I'm not going, I'm surrounded by women in my own life. Thank God. I love women. I always have,
They make it a better place.
Yeah. I'm happily married, and I have daughters and daughter-in-laws and so forth. So, and I love the company of women, and they're just amazing. The gentleness and the beauty. And that really is what God has bequeathed to women. And then you have what I hesitate to use the term, but I'm going to use it anyway. You have a kind of witchcraft which has been imposed on women, and which is so unnatural. Again, going all the way back to ISIS in Egypt, not the Arab terrorist group, but the original goddess Isis, who was a witch goddess, and the destruction of infant life. And so when you have women being perverted from their role of mothering, and even if they never want to have a child, they always can use that maternal instincts to be an honorary aunt to those who do have children. In my wife's family, she had a maiden aunt who lived with the family there. She wasn't a very good cook or anything like that, but my wife comes up with these little sayings that she heard in the 1950s and 60s as she was growing up. Her aunt imparted them and told her stories. So everybody has a place in what is the fundamental basis of a healthy human society, by which we cannot advance, which is the family and family values. And so when you have the beauty of women and their maternal instincts, whether they're mothers or not, perverted into this blank check for abortion, which is really infanticide since it's allowed to occur up to the 9th month of pregnancy, then you do have a fundamental denial of biological reality. And I created a bumper sticker that says human rights for unborn human beings. And that's what they are. And, Black people's humanity was denied. That's how Black slavery was justified. And we have the humanity of the unborn. Their murder is justified by the denial of their humanity. So if you're killing a child at any stage of their gestation, it's a huge sin. But you're doing it at 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 months. The doctors and the nurses who are conducting that can all see that this is a human being. And many premature babies survive at that time. So we know what we're doing. This is part of the revelation of the method. We're revealing the fundamental insanity of American society to have, you mentioned a figure of 75 million. As far as I know, about 40 million babies have been killed in this country since abortion was legalized. And I know in China, according to the Chinese Communist Medical Association itself, when they had the one-child policy, 300 million female babies were murdered by abortion in China. And what happens to the feminists here when you have a majority of little girls being murdered? And I haven't heard much of an uproar from feminists, except maybe the Elizabeth or the Susan B. Anthony Society, which is a wonderful group of feminists who are pro-life. But otherwise, you don't hear about it. Like you also find that a majority of feminists are in favor of men masquerading as being women, which also is just a sign of pathology, that we are breaking down in our fundamental morality and we are decaying as human beings as part of this alchemical devolution. So, yeah, that's a big issue. And then the next thing in terms of a denial of indisputable biological reality is female impersonators. And I think that part of the fact that that's gained so much popularity, besides the fact that elite media and other sectors of our ruling class society are behind it, is that we're failing to really create the right framework for how we oppose it, because it's often a debate about, it's sex assigned at birth and gender. No, let's clear all of that away, okay? It's not sex assigned at birth. This is assigned at conception by the Creator. Human beings possessed of XX chromosomes are female. That's indisputable. Impersonators claiming to be women and who are described in the media as trans women and trans girls. They want those words to resonate in our heads, see? Women, girls, they put trans as the prefix, but what resonates is women and girls. So we're thinking, wow, how unfair to block some kind of girl from running against other girls. Well, these trans women and girls possess XY chromosomes. They are male. That's biological reality. And the association of the word women with this impersonation is what Orwell warned us was newspeak, and that's what we have. And I think that if we were more rational, the left would recognize this because of its indisputability. But we're not. We're in this era of not only ideological fanaticism, I think it goes beyond that. I think that we've actually been decayed to the extent that many people can't see this. And so that's two factors in the revelation of the method. It's clear to us, and yet we're not acting about it. I mean, the right to life movement in this country is fairly small in consideration of the kind of Holocaust that has been created in these abortion chambers. And the movement about women who have to compete against men, and the New York Times actually says, well, it's really not clear whether these men have advantages over the women.
I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I mean, let's see. Let's get a heavyweight male boxer and a heavyweight female boxer and see what happens. Okay, I mean,
yeah, and it's also when we get into like domestic violence, no one's ever like, well, he shouldn't do that because he's got more testosterone than her. No one ever says that. It's always because he's physically bigger than her that we are very concerned for the female safety. That's why they removed the guy from that. And I'm not saying it's always perfect when that does happen. But the way that no one's ever going, the guy is the abuser because he has more testosterone. It's their physical build is different than a female. And each male and female are both built for different jobs. That's just the way it is. Those are facts. And it's very interesting to me that the pro-choice people were very anti-choice when it came to vaccines. And they were like, no, you have no choice what you can do with your body right there. And that's why a lot of the steam behind the pro-choice movement died off. They lost everybody. They go, you're a giant hypocrite. And it's also very interesting to me, listening to you talk about chromosomes, that the people who, during the vaccines, were like, I trust the science, don't trust the science when it comes to chromosomes. Mm-hmm. So it's again, it's mental gymnastics.
Right.
What fits your narrative is what you're going to go with. And it goes back to what we say all the time here. It's not about being right. It's about doing right. And doing right is admitting when you're wrong. And that going with what is nuance is also, to me, also known as common sense. Common sense is understanding the nuance of every situation and being able to make the correct choice. Yeah. I mean, it is crazy to me. It's like I'm 53 now. XG at the top, at least on my Zoom, is the youngest one. And I see people his age, and if not younger, in their 20s. And we got this really crazy thing going on where women talk about children and babies in such negative ways that I've never seen it ever in my history. If you went back 10, 15 years from ago and went to them, hey, in the year 2026, women will hate children and men don't want to get laid. And they'd be like, oh, you're crazy. That's the bedrock of how we interact with each other. And it just shows you how powerful the propaganda is, which I think propaganda is sorcery. It is energy manipulation. Mm-hmm. That the propaganda is so strong that it overrides your biological drives.
Right. And this is what they're putting through now. I find it in much feminist literature, or if you're reading the New Yorker, or one of the high-toned, highbrow magazines for the elite, you find that it's more or less pregnancy is regarded as toxic, tears apart the vagina. I heard one woman say, it's just this horrible thing. These are folks who are so disconnected from reality, from history, from their grandmother's experiences. We had a midwife who delivered about 900 babies in Africa and then another 100 in Great Britain. And we were very pleased to be able to have her to deliver our children. And she talked about the African women and how, and this was also true, as I understand it, in Nepal and places like that, how the more children they had, the more erotic and attractive they were to men. And that women would come up, a mother of 8 or 9 children who's still working in the fields and so forth, and still happy to have those children. And these are not enslaved blacks or anything like that. They're free African women and Nepalese women. And people are, the guys are regarding them as the sexiest women, on the scene, which is the opposite of many men's attitude today. Don't forget, abortion largely proceeds, not entirely, from the Playboy mentality in men that arose in the 1960s with the Playboy philosophy. And it was the idea that, encourage the woman to get rid of the baby so we can keep on having lots of sex. And that really undermined women and their maternal instincts. But my point is that in the rest of the healthy world, the birth of children is considered an enhancement of the woman and of her attractiveness. And I know a lady who had 10 children. She tried to have 12. She would have had 20 if she'd had her way. She miscarried 2 because she was still having them in her 40s. And after every one of those 10 births, she reverted back to being 5'6" and 125 pounds. Just loved breastfeeding the kids. She wasn't a drudge. She had a degree. She was a professional, had a career. And, it was just a wonderful exemplar of what motherhood meant before this sick pathological feminism got hold of the minds of women and men and put forth just what you're talking about. So I think if you go to the third world, you find a very different experience. And this particular lady who had the 10 felt that it enhanced her health. That, when you give birth, it's a tremendous discharge. I've been at the births of our children, and you see all of this coming out of the woman. It's a huge discharge. And, she's much more, to use a Chinese medical term, much more yang than she was before. And there is a strengthening aspect to it. And so, I'm born in the 1950s, and I saw women who had 4 or 5 or 6 children who were healthy and strong. And so it depends on what we want to impose on this. Do we want to impose the belief that it's a pathology, or do we want to accept what all of mankind has accepted? It's a wonderful, natural thing. And my own wife says, so much of the ladies in the higher classes talk about organic food and being natural and everything else. Well, why did they take the COVID shot? That's not natural. Why are they against many children? That's not natural. This natural thing has its limits according to whose ideology is in charge of the narrative. And I think that's also a problem here. And here in North Idaho, where we have many large families being attracted to living here because it's a pro-family area, you see tremendous happiness and fulfillment. And I love to be around children. There was a book written by a historian in New England about the history of New England in the 18th century, in the era of the founders, and the title of it was "Children Everywhere." And that's how it was, And I mean, you're 53. It might not have been quite so prevalent, but growing up in the 1950s, for me, there were children everywhere, and I was part of that. And I think we have a very sad society and culture when it's largely childless. And so many of these BBC's programs, Jane Eyre or Charlotte Bronte's, and other shows like that, they rarely show children mobbing everywhere, maybe at the wedding in the concluding scene, but children were everywhere. Breastfeeding was everywhere. And when you have that overwhelming affirmation of life and families, you're going to dispel a lot of the morbidity of conspiracy theory that afflicts some of our colleagues. And you're going to find that you're rooted in what you talked about, Sam, common sense and life itself. And I think that's why North Idaho has been a magnet for stuff like that. And I know I enjoy living here. I'm not crazy about the winters, but I enjoy it.
No, women are terrified. Women are terrified to have kids. All they can think about is their body and epidural. If you can even convince them to have a kid, they're like, I'm taking the epidural no matter what. And like you said, they're so organic, everything organic. But yet again, when it comes to having the baby, let's drug him up right now. The second I can, let's epidural this kid up.
And what also is going on is that it's a very dark psyop, because they know that women, even though medically now they've extended the window of being able to have kids, and all you have to do is get them to a certain age where they haven't got married, they haven't had kids, and then this becomes this kind of, with a lot of them, a desperate run to have a child. And it's really hard. And that's done on purpose. So now you have a lot of these women, and some of them are brave enough when they're in their 40s to come out and say, I was wrong. But most of them won't, because it's all about towing the line and misery loves company. Okay. And there's actually been studies that show the demographic that reports the most mental illness and depression and anxiety are women, particularly progressive women in their 40s. Well, what does that time represent? That represents where your youth has kind of gone away, your fertility, and in men, their athleticism. It tends to go away right around then. And then all of a sudden, this kind of reality comes where you hear women say it a lot, and we're blessed to have a lot of female listeners, and they know that I love them. I have daughters. Is that, this notion that when a woman becomes older, she becomes invisible. And that's not true. You're not invisible. You just become like everybody else now, where you have to earn everything you get, and you're not just given free stuff because everyone wants to hook up with you. But the reality is that you're not supposed to be at the nightclubs. You're supposed to be taking care of the children. And it's been turned into this kind of like slavery, the way, we're all men here, and, and there's women that work too. I'm not talking about that, but we all work all the time, and our kind of deep down in our belief is like, man, it would be great to find something that I wouldn't have to work as much as I do. Even though we love our work, it'd be great to be able to do it because we want to, not because we have to, because we have to take care of so many people. And like the notion of being able to be a stay-home mom, which I know is a luxury, but the idea that is somehow being a 1950s housewife, is kind of crazy to me. So it's all brainwashing. It's all propaganda. It's all like the notion of being a stay-home mom is slavery, working for a corporation that could fire you tomorrow because an AI can do your job or a foreigner can come do your job for half the cost is kind of freedom. The mental gymnastics you have to do to get to that point is insanity to me. And
I agree.
It's just weird times. Last thing I want to ask you about is your thoughts on the Charlie Kirk situation. There's a lot of people who it's still a real hot button issue, even though it's happened. I don't even know how long ago. Is it even a year? September. So what is your thoughts on all that? Because you wanted to talk about revelation of the method with that.
Well, I really admire Joe Kent, and and one of the things you were talking about, some of the positive aspects of Trump, the fact that he put Tulsi Gabbard in at the top of the intelligence pile, and then put Joe Kent in as the head of counterintelligence. I mean, that's really quite a coup. We haven't seen all of the benefits of that yet, but some of them are accruing. And one of those was the video Joe did in June, which is linked on my Substack column, michaelhoffman.substack.com, in the June column. But anyhow, where what he said was absolutely amazing, because of, you have to assume the kind of access he had into all the different hidden doors, or many of them anyway, of the intelligence octopus. And so, Charlie Kirk's assassination came in the wake of his being cut off by billionaire Zionist donors. And then he's slowly turning against the Gaza genocide and against Trump's contemplation of an Iran invasion. And this is a guy with spectacular talents, both polemical and in terms of speaking. And he had the love and affection and attention of young people. All of those are explosive factors for any type of cryptocracy that will really put them into a panic. So those are facts that we know. We don't want to extrapolate too far from that, but those are facts that we know. And the thing is that according to Joe Kent in his video statement, the attempted assassination of Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, and the assassination of Charlie Kirk was an investigation that his counterintelligence agency and the agents under him, he had launched. He had launched that. And why would Kash Patel, the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, come along and end those investigations? That is a damaging revelation by the head of the federal government's counterintelligence division at that time, and who has also insinuated that Trump's allegiance to Israeli policy and conquest is motivated by his fear of assassination by Israeli agents. I don't know how that wasn't on the front page of any newspaper worthy of the word journalism, or very much discussed even in the populist conservative movement. But I know it shook me up. And I know to me that it's a clear example of the revelation of the method, because I think that Joe, a combat veteran of 10 or 11 tours in the Middle East, he's got his life on the line for what he believes in. And I think he has tremendous credibility. He went into some depth about some of the aspects, the anomalous aspects of the shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania. And he also sees some of that in Charlie Kirk's thing. Now, as far as endorsing Candace Owens' speculations, I can't do that. I've tried to follow her line of thinking. It's mostly anecdotal. I admire her courage. She's a very attractive person, but I haven't seen any smoking gun there or anything even close to it. But when Joe Kent came out with this, and that Patel was blocking it, our Federal Bureau of Investigation blocking it, well, if FBI blocked the Kennedy conspiracy investigation, when the heck are we ever going to have a free national investigative body that will get to the bottom of this, as Trump promised, for the sake of truth and this America? And we're not seeing it. And Kent had the guts to come out and bring that out. And I think we really have to contemplate that. I'm going to be very interested in watching the trial of the accused assassin and seeing where that goes. I certainly have my respect for Erica Kirk has been lowered by the extent to which she has turned Charlie's beliefs toward the channel. And I think that that's unfortunate. Maybe she's under threat too. I don't know. In that case, we have to cut her a lot of slack. But both the Butler PA attempted murder, and of course, he did kill Corey there, as well as the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I think they stink to high heaven. But that's just an intuition of mine, and I'm waiting for more empirical evidence.
Well, there's the whole talk about the microphone and all that stuff, and I'm not saying what is, but I remember when the Israeli pager attack happened in Lebanon, and everybody, all the conservative podcasts that were going on were singing its praises. And I said to them, watch out. If they can do it to them, they could do it to you. And then, there's a lot of people, and I somewhat want to lean to that myself, is that microphone might have been involved. Now, I don't have enough information to say, but if you were put a gun to my head, that's what I would believe. But I'm just saying that I was telling everybody that a long time ago. Michael, I got to be honest with you. You're one of my favorite people to talk to. It's like such an honor to have you on. Again, I said it earlier. You're just a wealth of knowledge.
Can I ask you one question before we go?
You cannot, Johnny. Yes, you can.
Michael, hey, so I worked in journalism and print journalism for a long time too. And I'm curious what you mentioned there in passing that this wasn't picked up at all. The comments from what's the guy's name? Kent. Yeah. What do you think? Because I mean, when I haven't worked in print since 2016, and when I left, they were in this mode where anything that got clicks and views was worth the ink. What is the decision making in like edit boards and the morning meetings now? Do you think that is leading them? Because there's so many threads like that just haven't been followed. There have been no man hours put on them. I know investigative teams have been completely wiped off the board as an entity now for the most part, unless with some rare exceptions. What's your thought on that? I'm really curious what you think.
It's going to be money. When you see how Paramount was taken over, CBS News was taken over, the rule of billionaires and the billionaires' veto, which they exercised largely behind the scenes. And I also think that it's fear. I think that when, for example, Sam raised the issue of the pagers, and the U.S. media reported as the pagers just went off in the pockets and in the hands of Hezbollah terrorists, and that's who's died. But Middle Eastern news media will report and explain the fact that it killed hundreds of civilians and in many cases blinded them. I'm not sure why there was a larger extent of blinding rather than other types of mutilation and injuries. And then Netanyahu comes along in a very symbolic gesture and gives Trump a gold pager.
Crazy.
And some people, including Joe Kent, tend to think that was a little bit of a threat to him.
Yeah.
And so I think that when you see the level of the assassination machine operating in the Middle East, where The head of Hezbollah was killed, and then several other officers were easily killed. Penetration of the Iranian intelligence services, so that where the location of their leaders and the bunkers and so forth were easily mapped out, and they were destroyed. And so you have a high-level assassination bureau, no doubt about it, with the Mossad. And I wonder if that isn't also a factor. And as Marjorie Taylor Greene said in her disgust about Congress, she said, "Where are the men?" And without courage, we are lost. And whether you're a woman or a man, we do not have enough courageous people who are willing to step up and risk their lives in order to do what is necessary. And I think if people are under threat of assassination, they need to gather facts about that and broadcast it if they're in journalism or whatever, and let people know. Not do it in a paranoid fashion or hysterical fashion, but simply present the facts. So at least if something is done to take them down, the American people are further aware and maybe ultimately much more inspired by the fact that they must rise up, because otherwise they may be next.
How much do you think blackmail is involved?
Oh, blackmail is huge, especially sexual blackmail of the type that Epstein was involved in. I mean, we have a plague of pornography in America today, such as has never really been seen before. Some of the Roman emperors collected pornography of the day, such as it is. But, the average teenager has seen more pornography than any Roman emperor, anyone who had any resources to access such things 70 or 80 years ago. What is the effect on that? I don't see studies of it, probably because it's so lucrative. They don't really want it stemmed. And it's not just that. It's also you have young girls today, 13, 14, and 15, who are validated largely by the fact that they have a boyfriend, not for their accomplishments. And this is a problem in our educational system, where they need to be involved in sports and intellectual and artistic pursuits. And that is from where they draw their validity. And instead, you have especially the children of the working class. You see them with heavy makeup at age 14 or 15, throwing themselves towards boys. We all know that boys, largely want only one thing. And this is creating early pregnancies, venereal disease. And then also there is a huge appetite among men over, adult men for those girls. And wherever those girls can be lured into areas where cameras and recordings are set up, then you then have that politician. And Thomas Massey is right now trying to push through a bill that will reveal the extent to which Congress has paid off these blackmail attempts, that they've actually paid off the girls or the people who witnessed these things. And he's trying to push that through Congress. It may go nowhere, but it's an excellent opportunity. But yeah, blackmail is a huge part of it. I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah, absolutely. Money, fear of murder, and blackmail so that you've lost your reputation. Absolutely.
Well, Michael, again, it was a wonderful episode. You're just an amazing guest. And we're always proud that you would come on our little show and share all your research with us. And open door anytime you want, my friend. You can come on anytime, all the time you want. Thank you one more time. Please tell them where they can find you, my friend.
michaelhoffman.substack.com. That's the main one. I hope they'll access it.
All right. Great episode, man. All-time banger, my friend. All-time banger. We appreciate you. And hey, everybody, happy 4th of July. Even though it's some crazy past history, I think you should enjoy where you live. I don't know one country that doesn't love their country. And, nationalism can get a little crazy when it comes to the military and all that stuff, and joining because you think you're fighting for freedom when you're really just a stormtrooper for the banks. But there's nothing wrong with being proud of where you're from. And like Michael said, you can tell someone by the fruits they bear. Everyone wants to come to America. It's a wonderful place to live. Is it perfect? No. Show me a perfect place. At least we have air conditioning. Okay. We love it. God bless. Happy 4th of July. And we'll see you on the other side. Thanks. And let's break down the episode. All right. What'd you guys think of Michael Hoffman?
The usual, dude. Always comes in hot, dropping knowledge.
Dropping knowledge. What a encyclopedia, dude. Oh my God. I wish I could just take all of his knowledge. It'd be so great. Oh, yeah.
Download it.
Download right to my brain. Just the facts.
One of the good ones. It's one of the good ones.
One of the good ones, dude. And it's just like, your history is a lie. All of it's a lie. It's been spoon-fed to you in a way to make you want to hate your fellow man. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. And the propaganda is so strong, dude. It is so strong. It's insane how powerful it is. It's just sad and it's crazy. And I love it's like, so they might have been part of, like, all the Freemasonry shit was put in later. That's super interesting to me.
I agree.
It was built on Christian values, and later on they installed all the Freemasonry, which is what Freemasonry does, right? Free Masonry.
He's also right to point, or it's interesting that he points out that even for the people, the founders who claim deism or whatever, they were all born and raised in a kind of Christianity that we can't even really appreciate as modern people. Do you know what I mean? It permeated everything. It was in your cells. And there.
Do you wish we were back there like that, Johnny?
No, no, I don't think so. No, because I think, I think free will and the Enlightenment, we've gained more than we've lost, but that is not always going to be the case if we keep down this path we're on. But yeah, that's a tough question, dude. That's a really tough question. What do you think? Shit.
I mean, it's you bring up free will. I do believe, dude, that we, like, there are things I like about right now. But I do think our separation from God is why we're so lost right now.
Yeah.
But I 100% believe that everybody's on their own journey, and you have to find God on your own. And that there's been a lot of stuff in organized religion that could be seen as control mechanisms. And on top of that, dark sorcerers coming in and just manipulating every aspect of the religion to like the Catholic priest scandal. Like, to me, that's done on purpose to detach you from God, and I don't know, man. I think there's some, Jesus is it. I think he even said it. It's like Jesus and what he did and what he believed is the opposite of everybody else. And I do think that man was important, no matter how much people try to tell me. So here's my thing with religion, dude, is like, I lived an anti-religion life for decades, and my life was completely out of whack and crazy. Mm-hmm. And as I get closer to God in the best way I possibly can, unwinding a lot of chaos, right?
Right.
I feel like my life vibrates on a higher level. And I don't know if you'll ever live in what I always call a sky blue life, because I just don't think that is the realm we live in. I think God puts obstacles in front of you to learn lessons of life. So later on, when something bigger comes, you have the tools to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're always going to have ups and downs all the time. And you're always going to have moments where you wonder, why is this going this way?
Right.
So that's my opinion. I've been on the other side. I've been in the darkness. I've been in the low vibration. I've been in the world where my vices control everything. And it's just it's an anxiety filled life. Then you go the other way. But I think you have to find that journey. I think you have to go on that journey for yourself. And like, I've seen a lot of people who grew up in the modern day, and I would say when I was a kid, like from the 70s, even though it's not today, I do feel like that was when things kind of started to change, maybe 60s, 70s, and whether that's good or bad, it is. That a lot of my friends who grew up super religious really pushed back against it as they got older. And maybe they came back around later on and realized, oh, maybe my parents weren't totally wrong about that. So I think it's a personal journey. What are your thoughts?
I see it coming back. I see a bunch of kids, younger kids. I mean, it's all the influencers. A lot of the influencers are into God. Like, I mean, Andrew Tate. All of them talk about some type of God, higher power, and these kids follow them. So I think these kids are into it. Kids aren't drinking as much. They're not partying as much. So what do you think they're doing? Getting closer to God on their times off. Because if you're not partying, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the question was, I mean, your original question though was like, do I think it's better than? And like think about because that's where religion also made the standards for society, you know, like dress and how your leisure time was all somehow related to that stuff, language, the things you could say. And some of those things I don't think were as good. You know, one thing he mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, and I remember hearing it before now, that in like the 1800s, 1700s, they thought meteors, like he was saying. Remember, he was saying it was like the French scientific society or whatever was like meteors not possible. And I was reading some of what they thought about them, and they were like, yeah, rocks just fall out of the sky. That's totally it's that same condescending tone in what they wrote about it back then, about that people condescend to us now, you know, on certain viruses and that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, rocks are just magically falling out of the sky. That makes total sense because there's Earth in the sky. Sure. And
So what was what did they think it was?
well, a lot of them thought, from what I've read anyway, and I don't know. Like, I'm sure there's some variants here, but they thought it was just like old wives' tales, like people talking out of school.
Oh, they just thought someone lied about something coming out of the sky. They never really thought it was
Right, yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Oh,
Some of what I saw was anyway. I don't know. I don't know about.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like that's with the last video we watched on Tinfoil Hat, where you mentioned we're 3D characters. You know how he was talking about being 2D on a piece of paper.
Sagan, yeah.
Sagan, it kind of reminds me of that. Like if you've never seen it, what the f are you talking about? What do you mean a rock coming out of the sky? Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Guys, if you go to samtripoli.com, you can check out my dates. Going to be in Miami, then Saratoga, Florida for Joke World, then Lawerence, Kansas. Then I'm going to be in Tulsa, TrutherCon at Dallas with my boys at the Skiba News Network, Skankfest, and then Austin. Yeah. And then just get on the newsletter. You can watch the word. I don't know if I want to have the YouTube video there, but maybe, I don't know.
Well, I will say I looked it up on my phone, and it's just your dates on my phone is all you see when you go there. It's interesting. It's like,
which I'm not against.
It's like I went to your dates page.
Go down. My premium content is fire. Talk about cash daddies. Dude, you get 3 episodes a week of the best premium content you'll ever see. Whether I'm doing reaction videos, whether I'm talking Kurt Metzger, talking to the boys from whatever this is, it's the best. See, these episodes of Tinfoil Hat tend to be evergreen, meaning you can listen to it whenever you want. But the premium content is the modern, like what's happening right now. Okay, so if you're looking for stuff about right now, that's where you're gonna get it. Talk about cash daddies, Johnny.
Yeah, how he's killing it. I think, what did he say? This has been June was one of the best month of the year so far, one of the best months they've had. So yeah, with all the crazy stuff going on abroad, you know, with Iran and everything, Howie Dewey has still managed to profit.
Make that money, honey.
Banking fatties. Wait, do I have it? Hold on, let me see. No. There it is. I found it.
Banking fatties. What the fuck is that?
What are you doing?
I don't even know. Oh, okay. Yeah, keep going down. You can check out, keep going. Chaos Twins. I'll have stuff for that this week. Sorry, guys. And then Tinfoil Hat t-shirts. There should be a bunch of new t-shirts out. I've sent him like 3 or 4. He hasn't put them out yet. Look for those. It's a great way to support the show. I need to get a local celebrity shirt again. Go back. And then we got Wise Wolf Gold and Silver. We got Chemical Free Body. We got EMF Rocks. We got Brain Supreme. All these guys are things that I think you guys need. Their affiliate programs. Anything else, XG?
I got a live show. Me, Steph Tone from the Deftones. We co-hosting We Don't Smoke the Same at the Post Pizza. Tickets at Eventbrite, 7/10, July 10th.
Damn, that's a big get, dude.
Yes, it is. We got Post Pizza, Flat Earth guys. Come talk to us.
Johnny.
What did you post? What? Pizza?
Post Pizza is where it's
that
called.
Place? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got you. Okay. Broken Sim will be audio will be out by the time you hear this. Please go check it out. we.
And real quick,
had a good
finally,
time.
go to our. Sorry, Johnny. Sorry to cut you off.
No, just
go to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/tinfoilhatofficial and help us beat the algorithm, dude. We're fighting for our lives over here. You know? Yeah, the episodes are doing great, dude. Our numbers keep going up, even though they should. And then go to youtube.com, Sam Tripoli Comedy. I got a brand new one I'm about to put up. I have a written joke special coming out. Should be in August. And then I have a bunch of crowd work specials. It's just free shit to have fun with. Don't get angry about it. So yeah. Anyways, back to Michael Hoffman. I thought it was great. I think he's a national treasure, and I think he has a great view of the world. And I think it's important to understand that your history is told to you to control the way you see the world, to create the spectrum in which you see everything. And they want you mad at your fellow man. They want you to be ashamed of your history, and you should be very proud of your history. There's a reason why everyone wants to come here, and that's my opinion. Anything else, guys? What do you guys? Anything?
Just hit that like button, subscribe, and now you're right. I mean, history is completely. It is, and it's going to get worse. Imagine what the kids are going to get taught now. Imagine the high school yearbooks now.
It's crazy, dude. It's just crazy, dude. Johnny, anything else?
I mean, what do you mean, promo or?
No, just like about the episode.
Yeah, it's, what he said at the end, it's really true. I think about some people at least being afraid for their jobs, if not their lives, to talk about some of this stuff. And I mean, I feel for anybody in that position in the media or something, but I honestly think most of them are just brainwashed. Do you know what I mean? Like yeah.
I'm also surprised that he actually is like open-minded, because he mentioned Candace on the Charlie Kirk thing, which is pretty, like, she's kind of wild, but him even saying I've listened to it, I just can't align with it. I'm like, all right, I'm with that. That's all I need to hear.
All right. Well, great episode. Let's enjoy these highlights.
Here's a clip from the latest Broken Sim.
Dude, Johnny, have you seen Scott Wiener can't walk around without people yelling at him?
Did I see
so
it?
Funny. Is that going to be our hot topic? Jamie Starr's birthday. Hey, Johnny.
It's his best. So if you don't know, we have this state senator, he was a state senator in California, who is he's like our Mamdani, really. He's the most liberal guy you could imagine. Progressive.
I don't even think Mondani's as bad as he is. Like, this guy is literally the worst. And his last name Wiener, and all the Wieners are scumbags. They're just scumbags.
He can't go anywhere. Now, Spencer Pratt tweeted this out. Hey, Wiener guy, remember when you called me Mick a bigot? How does it feel now that the Frankenstein you created is coming for you? Every stupid communist learns this history lesson the hard way. Enjoy. And he shows a tweet here. Mayor McBigot say what? Is what Wiener said to Spencer Pratt, asking. I guess he slammed him. He said that, what do Scott Wiener and homeless drug addict encampments have in common? They should both be prohibited from being within 1,000 feet of elementary schools. Right?
Dude, that is fire,
so now,
bro.
Wiener can't go in public without being confronted for
Johnny. Now, real quick, are we tempting the tech gods by showing this? Is this seen as something they would be like, "Wah, you wah, 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 wah,
it is,
wah, wah,
okay, so
wah,
wah." What do you think?
I mean, dude, we're gonna do it, but I say we do it and let we gotta be honest, dude.
We should say though, starting out last week, last episode, our show got taken down like fully.
Not taken down, dude. I am dangerous. When will you guys realize this? I'm going for two things: dangerous and making hot hits. Okay, we're talking hot gay sex. Hot gay sex. We're talking hot.
So it was the Oliver Tree thing. We played some of that with Chad, that documentary about him, and then it showed his parents saying, kind of concern trolling him. I'm pretty sure it was all scripted, but they were like, "We're worried about him. We're bringing him home." And while we were talking about that, we got flagged, or that segment of the podcast got flagged for what was it?
Bullying.
Bullying. Yeah, right. Bullying, and then death did not making light of the death of a prominent figure. and not even usually they give you a warning and they demonetize, but this one the video got fully taken down.
And
then
it's
we
like
appealed
really
it.
crazy, dude.
You know,
It's
I keep
like
seeing this that
really-
he looks like Rob Dyrdek. Oliver Tree does, and he does look like Rob Dyrdek. That's true. I little younger though, I think, than Rob. Anyway, so here's the wiener whiner.
What are you, the
however he
fifth
says it.
flat earther?
Yeah.
I
Here's,
forget who he said Dana White was, and like it was so dumb.
Who was
It was.
it?
I think it
Oh,
was
you don't
like
remember?
Alex Jones and Dana White were the same people.
Oh right, yeah. Everybody's Alex Jones. So here it is.
I've invited him on. I've invited him on.
He's afraid.
Just know he hasn't been on the show because he chooses not to.
Look
Scott-
at how twinky he is. This is like if Ari was a twink, right? Look at how twinky.
Oh yeah, this is gay Ari for sure.
Yeah.
I think your legislation on trans issues and your legislation specifically protecting queers on the sex offender registry is fantastic.
Stop. Right there. Listen to what this guy just said.
Yeah.
Like everyone's hailing this thing because they hate Scott Wiener so much. But this guy said, thank you for not, making it so we don't go on the sex offenders list for doing evil stuff to kids. Just think about that. Like, there's no good guys in this video, by the way.
No.
There's no heroes. There's no nothing. It just scumbag. This is like Jason Voorhees fighting Freddy Krueger. There's no good guys. Thank you for making it so we can do bad things to children and not have to register as a sex offender. Thank you so much. I mean, like, dude, there's no good guys here.
No, and there seldom are. But do you think
Hold on. This guy's trying to say, listen, dude, this is like the chat on my chats are fire, and then once in a while someone goes fully stupid. This guy thinks this guy was being sarcastic saying that. Do you believe that, Johnny?
Listen to his voice. Of course not. No.
I mean,
I want to thank you
unbelievable.
for all the work you've done on
Oh
queer
my
and trans
God.
issues.
Pretty
Scott,
sure it's sarcasm, guy. Pretty sure you're ODing on. Dude, my dad right now, if he read that, would be like, dude, you're ODing on dumb pills.
Your dad would say that? Really? That's great.
Sam, don't OD on dumb pills.
Wait, hold on. I got to see if this. You ever do the thing where you go onto the homepage of YouTube and get to what you're going to, and then right as it's going away, you see something that you're like, I need to look at that. And then you go back and it's gone. That happens to me.
Hold on. This guy's saying Freddy Krueger was clearly the good guy. Do you believe that?
I would go for Freddy. Yeah, that was what I was saying. Yeah,
but he's a bad guy that you're rooting for taking out the bad guy. But he's not a good guy, dude. You can't sleep. You gotta do yayo for like days just to live.
But what I just saw,
everyone thinks Freddy Krueger's the good guy. Unbelievable. And this is why we got a political system with two parties that people still believe in. Literally, that's the same thing. It's literally the same thing.
Oh, no, do you know what? This is what I saw, by the way. I said I clicked back to Bill Maher just had Kevin Spacey on his podcast.
Yes.
Oh no. I don't have to watch that, obviously, but
you got to, Johnny. You gotta do it. How you gonna jack it to anything else? You gotta watch.
Oh no, what are you doing? Bill is so contrarian that he just ties.
It's not even contrarian. It's like I don't see anything wrong with it. Like 3 out of the 4 people that accuse you of stuff ended up dead. Why do I care? Why do I care? You're a great actor. What do I care? That was my Bill Maher. I thought it was getting close there.
Oh, is that what that was? Oh,
yeah, that was my Bill Maher. I don't care. Okay,
people. That's the only word I can do is
people. I don't care. Okay,
people.
Do whatever you want. I don't care. Okay.
Okay, people. That's the only phrase I have of Bill Maher's. Okay. So Wiener here looks exhausted. Doesn't he just look haggard? Like he's had it. Look at the woman, dude. By the way.
By the way.
Look at the behind.
Look at him. Can you start from the beginning, dude, and watch his walk?
Hold on. Look over his shoulder at the person in the back. Do you see?
Thank you for saying person. You don't know what that is, Johnny. That is a Bigfoot sighting. That is rainbow Bigfoot.
That? It's got a double mohawk. One side is green and the other side is pink, and a leather jacket and a Diet Coke, probably cherry.
Yeah,
All right, here
Johnny,
we go.
start from the beginning. He looks like he might have had a long night. Look at him. He's like,
Scott,
long night.
your
My butt
legislation
hurts.
on trans.
Do you think, you know what? I bet he's
Stop
got
it, Johnny. Let's listen to this again and really let's see if this guy's super sarcastic.
Let's see. When I see him walking, I think he's got a song in his head. And
a weird sand Jedi right there. Some extra from like Star Wars.
Yeah, he looks like the new Star Wars. Yeah, that's the guy. He would be in the new Star Wars TV shows. No, I think when Wiener's walking, he's got a song in his head. You know what that song is, Sam? I think.
Yeah, go on.
I think you wrote the song that was in his head, Sam. About 10 minutes ago.
We're talking gay sex.
Yeah, that's what I imagine.
Sex.
That's what's in his head when he's walking. Always. Look,
yeah.
Scott, I think your legislation on trans issues and your legislation specifically protecting queers on the sex offender registry is fantastic.
I mean, that says everything.
I really
right
applaud you for that, and I think you deserve to be here for that. But I think your housing policy, and specifically your housing policy aligning with YIMBYs, and I think your policy, and I think your policy on the genocide in Gaza, I think your policy on the genocide in Gaza, it's terrible. I think you do not belong. I think you do not belong here. You do not belong here, Scott, anymore. It sucks.
Hey, look at that. Whatever that is.
Whatever that is. Dude, this is insanity, dude.
Look at him.
This is insanity, dude.
You've been terrible on Gaza.
Oh. You know what he looks like Waldo. Remember Waldo?
And he's like,
Waldo?
who can I blame this on? Who can I blame this on?
Oh, look at
Who
this.
can I blame this on? And dude, I mean, just classic. Has to bring up like 1940s Germany as this. It's like, dude, you are okay with what happens in Gaza, and you're okay with them hurting kids in your state, and you're blaming it on 1940s Nazi Germany. Like, dude, this is it, man. I mean, this is it.
These are his people, dude. This would be like if you went in the Comedy Store and everybody was just like, "F you, Sam Tripoli."
I mean, they say when I'm not there. No, I'm with you, dude.
This is his place, man. This is where he should be most comfortable. This isn't the only video, by the way. I'll let this play while I pull up the other video. There's more of him just being accosted in the streets.
How could someone like you?
If you'd like to hear the rest of this episode, subscribe to Broken Simulation in your podcasting app or check us out at youtube.com/Sam Tripoli.
Las 6 de la tarde es hora de Primer Impacto, con las noticias más increíbles e impactantes de la televisión. Primer Impacto desde esta tarde a las 6 por Univisión Puerto Rico.
And we're back. What's up? It's your boy XG Marks the Spot. How we doing? I got a crazy episode here for you guys. As you guys can tell, some crazy clips, some girl getting ran over, some guy snorting some flies. Yeah, some fucking dead flies. I don't know what's wrong with white people. But I got a bone to pick, dog. I don't know if you guys know. Well, I mean, if you've been watching the show, you know me and Chili, we've gone deep down the David the rapper homicide case or whatever is going on. He killed some girl from Lake Elsinore, Celeste Rivas. That's why we know about it, because I'm from Lake Elsinore, and it's a crazy case, dude. He's like a rapper slash Fortnite player slash Coachella performer, and he was like dating like some 13-year-old he met on Fortnite. And I don't know how me and Chili got caught up in this fucking rabbit hole, but we're there, dude. We send each other clips every day of what's going on with the trial. Whoop-de-whoop. He's fucked. Like, there's no going back. Like, if you know anything about the case, they found the dead girl from Lake Elsinore, Celeste Rivas, in his Tesla while this fool's on tour. Like, texting her, leaving evidence that it's undoable type things. Like, texting her, Ubering her a ride to his house, and then she doesn't make it, so then he texts her, "Where are you?" Trying to confuse the cops and shit. It's just crazy. But the reason I gotta say I got a bone to pick is because I can't believe the trial isn't over. Innocent into proven guilty, but Hulu and Disney Plus decided to make a documentary. It's fucking nuts, dude. It just came out, and I love true crime. I'm not gonna lie, I love true crime. Any documentary of so-and-so killing so-and-so or this serial killer, I love it. Not gonna lie. But this girl, I don't know, for some reason I have like, for some reason, since she's from Lake Elsinore, I want justice for Celeste Rivas. And then putting out a documentary, calling it The Girl in the Trunk. It's like, dude, her name is Celeste. I don't know why I'm like very upset. I feel like, I'm sure a bunch of family members, when their family member dies and then they make a whole documentary on like Lifetime or HBO or Hulu, I'm sure they're not super stoked about it. But I don't know, dude. Don't want, and that's another thing. I watched the documentary last night just so I know what I'm talking about. It's the same bullshit me and Chili have been talking about. No new evidence, no new conspiracy. It's just them giving you the rundown, basically a very good production of a YouTube video, dude, pretty much. Like that Ross guy, I watched some guy named Ross. He goes deep down the rabbit hole on this fucking case. It's just nuts. I mean, I'm going to play you guys a trailer. Hopefully I don't get flagged for this crap, but they have a trailer. It was hard for me to find, and they're getting a lot of backlash because, dude, he's on trial, dog. He might plead guilty. He might not plead guilty. Shout out to everybody in the chat room. Dude, someone already super chatted $10. Shout out to the homie. Happy 4th, Primo. Enjoy your 4th and don't blow your fingers off. That's what I'm saying, dog. I got videos. Got a couple videos of don't be blowing your hands off. Just be careful, dog. I know Mexico's going to be celebrating as well because we're going to win against England. So just careful with the fireworks. But since he already donated $10, anybody who donates participates to win a We Don't Smoke the Same 710, baby. That's right, 710 tickets to the We Don't Smoke the Same Post Pizza, brought to you by Haydar and the Radar. We got chiclets as well. Go get your tickets now. Go get your tickets now. It will sell out. Why is this not working? There we go. Go get your tickets now. 710. Whoever super chats today is getting a free ticket. I'm gonna put you on my guest list. Kick it with the homies. Steptone from the Deptones is gonna be co-hosting. Go get your tickets now. I think there's only like 8, 9, 10 tickets left. Last time he's gonna hit me up about this shit, but yeah, go get your tickets now. We're gonna pack this place out. El Monte Post Peaks is 710. Doors open at 710. Go get your tickets. All you gotta do is super chat. So the homie already participated to super chat. I was gonna bring that up to a little later, but super chat away, and you might kick it with Steptone from the Deftones, E-Zone. Smoke this fucking place out. It's almost sold out. Back to this fucking Hulu documentary I was telling you guys about. Shit's nuts, dude. Like, I can't believe there's already a documentary, a series, because they only posted series 1. So I mean, I guess they got more information for us, but I'll play a little bit of it. I probably don't get flagged, but fuck it, whatever.
David is...
Oh, and then the worst part is they have people playing these characters. Like, there's a girl playing Celeste. Like, what the fuck is going on, dude? Just at least wait till the trial's over. What if this fool's not guilty? What if for some reason the little Asian boyfriend's the one who actually stabbed and killed her? And I don't know. It just sounds weird to have a whole documentary about this.
Young man who could have been a superstar. And Celeste was a child who could have done anything.
Celeste is 13. David is 18.
This is a tinderbox about to explode.
Oh my, delete everything.
See, they know. They're playing everything. Like, in the documentary, they play this exact clip on how, I mean, it's everything we already have.
Dismembered in the trunk of a car.
What really happened? We actually may have some answers, and they are horrifying.
The Girl in the Trunk, now streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu.
Fucked up, dude. I don't know why. I feel like they should give her some more. I don't even know why I'm so upset. I honestly don't. I don't know if it's because basically I've been talking about this shit. They should have got me on this fucking documentary, me and Chili Millie. Man, we would have killed it on the documentary. I would have, yeah, dog. Me and Chili know all. I mean, we don't know all the facts. I've been fucking shit up lately, but dude, it's just crazy to know that they have documentaries already. That means they've been working on this shit since they found out she was dead. They also try to talk to the parents. The parents kind of blew them off. I mean, dude, it's just, I don't know. I don't know how to feel.
Go deep, homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
Tinfoil hack, tinfoil hack, tinfoil hack.